Well, good evening. The Monday, June 14th, 2021 meeting of the Evanston City Council
Recording in progress.
shall come to order. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Newsma.
Present.
Councilmember Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Sufferton. Here. Councilmember Ravel.
Here.
Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Fleming.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Here.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Here.
We have a quorum present, and so we are prepared to do business. The first item is, would someone make a motion to suspend the rules to allow for remote participation?
So moved.
Clerk, God damn it. Councilmember Reed, I apologize. I don't know where that came from. Councilmember Reed moves to suspend the rules allowing for remote participation. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Fleming seconds. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Aye. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite. Kelly. Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
On a vote of 9-0, the motion carries and the rules are suspended, which will allow, we have all the city council here in person, but it will allow staff to participate remotely. The next item on our agenda is the mayor's public announcements and proclamations, of which we actually have several this month. So first of all, I've issued a proclamation making June 2021 LGBTQ Pride Month here in Evanston. I won't read the whole proclamation, but as you know, this is an annual celebration to commemorate the uprising of the Stonewall Inn that occurred in New York City in June of 1969. And it's really a celebration that was very much an underground thing for much of its history, has become a more open celebration of the pride that we feel and the solidarity we feel with the LGBTQ community. But it's a community that still is experiencing very, very significant discrimination and worse. And so I'm proud to make this proclamation, which concludes as follows. Now, therefore, I, Daniel Biss, Mayor of the City of Evanston, Illinois, do hereby proclaim the month of June 2021 as LGBTQ Pride Month in the City of Evanston, and encourage all people to recognize the enduring efforts and ongoing contributions of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer communities of our city. So Pride Month is ongoing, and there will be celebrations here in Evanston as well during part of it. Next, I wanted to let folks know that Bike Week will be occurring this year in our continuing theme of finding ways to, as the vaccination rate rises and we continue through phase 5, finding ways to do safe and healthy activities together. And Bike Week begins on June 21st this year, so hoping we can all enjoy that together. Next, another proclamation declaring June 4th, 2021 National Gun Violence Awareness Day here in Evanston. This is something that's occurring nationally. It was something that was brought to us by some of the local gun safety activist groups, particularly Moms Demand Action, and in an effort to both bring awareness to commemorate the tragic killing of Hadiya Pendleton and to begin to move forward a conversation in this country on the need to finally take concrete steps to begin to do something about the public health scourge of gun violence that we feel in our own community too often. And so that proclamation ends as follows. Now, therefore, I, Daniel Biss, Mayor of the City of Evanston, Illinois, do hereby proclaim the first Friday in June 4th, 2021, as National Gun Violence Awareness Day, and encourage all citizens to support their local community's efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and to honor and value human lives. Finally, a proclamation declaring June 19th, 2021 as Juneteenth Day here in the city of Evanston. As many people know, but as I have to say, I was not taught when I was in school word of the Emancipation Proclamation took 2.5 years to travel across the country. I believe it last arrived in Texas on June 19th, 1865, 2.5 years after the proclamation was first issued. And I think it's a really important rethinking of the way we tell our own story. We're so accustomed to describing July 4th as Independence Day and have way too often glossed over the question of for whom that independence meant something. And I think when we gloss over that question, we then gloss over the entire question of who we consider to be a part of our national family. And so there will be a parade occurring on June 19th this year, beginning at 11 o'clock at the Levy Center. And there'll be celebrations taking place that day at Twiggs Park, and I'm honored to take part in them and pleased to issue this proclamation, which ends as follows. Now, therefore, I, Daniel Biss, Mayor of the City of Evanston, Illinois, do hereby proclaim June 19th, 2021 as Juneteenth Day in the City of Evanston and urge all citizens to become more aware of the significance of the celebration in African American history and in the heritage of our nation and city. The last announcement I want to make, I'm sure many people on the council have been getting email recently from residents who are concerned about a relatively abrupt proposed change in the Metro schedule that would negatively affect especially Evanston residents who utilize the Union Pacific North Line to commute north, of whom there are plenty. This change was proposed by Metro in an environment where, because of the pandemic, they can kind of move forward without really receiving much public input, but we're going to do our best to urge them to rethink their judgment before their meeting that occurs on Wednesday. So I will be sending a letter to Metro, and I would certainly encourage any member of council who's interested in joining on that letter to be in touch with me by noon tomorrow, so that we can have as united a front as possible and encouraging them to rethink this decision, which I think is unhelpful for Evanston residents. So that concludes my public announcements. Next on the agenda is City Manager public announcements.
Thank you, Mayor Biss. I have no announcements this evening.
Thank you. And next is the communications from the City Clerk.
I just wanted to, I wanted to acknowledge the receipt of public comment from the Illinois Restaurant Association expressing their opposition to Ordinance 60-0-21. Public comment submitted by Kenneth P. Prosky, asking for the council to reject U2 zoning amendments. Kevin, and I'm sorry if I say this wrong, but Engbridge wanted the council to know that it's costing him 2 to 3 times more to purchase gas equipment, and would like to the council to reject P6. And Alfredo's Landscaping also asking the council to reject P6. Sandra Fredman hoping for the council to take bold action in favor of P6. Tim Sonder also in favor, and Ellen Galland is asking for the residents to be educated on lawn services, health in the environment, and hoping that we can enforce the existing seasonal ban. Gary Ketterson, also, and Chris Bear also hoping that we can enforce and also educate on the leaf blower ordinance. Gary Ketterson asking the council to reject dogs in restaurants, and Chris Martin asking the council to study the traffic in the intersection of Main and Sherman, and also the benefits. What are the benefits of rental buildings in Evanston. So that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Mendoza. So before we get to the next item on our agenda, I just want to make a quick observation. It's 7:25 now, so nearly 2 hours after this meeting was intended to begin. And I say that 3 weeks after a meeting that went very late, and I heard privately from a lot of people who were concerned about how late that meeting went. And I say this before public comment, but I direct it to both anyone intending to make public comment as well as to folks on the council for what will occur during the course of the rest of the meeting. In an effort to keep things moving, I intend to just be candidly relatively rigid in enforcement of the time restrictions, both during public comment and during the course of the council meeting in its entirety. So what I intend to do, I'll be using the timer up here. When there's 15 minutes left, I'll say, when there's 15 seconds left, thank you, clerk, sorry about that. I'll say 15 seconds. When the time is up, I'll say time, and simply ask everyone to comply to ensure that we have equal time given to everyone and the ability to conduct the meeting in a way that will allow everyone to observe it till the better end. So with that, we have 16 people seeking to make public comment. Each will be given 3 minutes. We'll begin with the 2 people who are here in person, the first of whom is Ray Friedman.
Thank you. Good evening. I like the 15-minute option better. Good evening, Mayor Biss, City Council members, City Manager, and City Clerk. It's great to be back at City Hall with a no-mask mandate. Hope everyone's feeling well and look forward to working once again in person with all of you to discuss issues that we can resolve through our dialogue. First, I would like to thank Mayor Biss for our first town hall meeting on ARPA. Thank you for lunch and my brand new City of Evanston water bottle. I did notice, however, that the second ARPA meeting is scheduled for Thursday at 4 o'clock at the same time as a public meeting for the Ridge Traffic Signal Project. Was wondering if one of these meetings can be changed to a time not conflicting with other meetings. Would like to congratulate Luke Stowe on his promotion and Aretha Barnes on her new role as temporary police chief. I also would like to wish Chief Cook all the best in his retirement. While there's a lot going on in Evanston, I'd like to speak for a moment on leaf blowers. We had a good discussion at our second ward meeting with a doctor who, I don't remember his name, but he talked about noise and other issues and other alternatives to gas-powered units and believe that there should be a compromise. I do agree with our conversation and compromise. I agree that with our conversation and compromise, most issues can be resolved. I believe there are acceptable alternatives to keep everyone happy instead of cutting out their use altogether. There are many tools that do many jobs, and there's something to be said for using the right tool for the right job. Lastly, I'd like to talk about an ordinance for public participation, which I have given copies to everyone except for Alderman Nguyen. I believe this ordinance as written or revised by City Council would allow our voices to be heard and acknowledged by City Council. We need a voice and a choice, and we need to be part of the process and part of the solution. Thank you very much, and welcome back to City Hall. Ray Friedman, 2nd Ward.
Thank you very much. First of all, I misspoke. There are 3 people who will be here in person. The next is Evie Russell.
Anybody has one? Mayor Biss, council members, I'm Evie Russell, 7th Ward resident for 40 years. I speak for fairness for the thousands of residents, businesses, and city officials who for 25 years united against NU's attempts to overturn the zoning code. Fairness for all voices before then rising against NU often illegal encroaching attempts and documented in my website. Fairness for us now in 2019 and 2021. Is it fair that our data and voices have often been obstructed and muffled, that information was withheld from us? Is it fair for the city to obfuscate city rules and disregard the comprehensive plan and zoning code? For several months, NU and the city held behind-the-scenes negotiations. Then the required city notice on NU's proposal was published in an inaccessible paywall newspaper. 91 pages of our experts' data was mislaid and mislabeled by the city. The Plan Commission never read the data. At PND, our expert witness was denied the same time as NU to present data. The city did not require parking or traffic studies for the arena's applications, neither for its renovation nor later its change in use. Despite our evidence, the city is still eager to accept NU's bait of contradictory, unsubstantiated, and false economic figures. For example, inflating the 2018 athletic tax revenue for the city by $300,000 and citing the home rule tax as 2% rather than 1.25%, a 60% error. Local businesses and residents feel ignored and disenfranchised. We're not the little guy here. All of Evanston are the little guy when pitted against NU, a multi-billion property tax-exempt corporation intent on self-gain. Stand up for us, Council. Do not enable NU's self-monetizing scheme to subvert our zoning protections and crush our quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The final in-person public commenter will be Mary Rosinski.
Hi, so nice to see all you guys in person again. I also am opposed to the zoning ordinance change. Wait, this is too high. In 2019, when council made the decision to allow Northwestern University to use its tax-exempt property in the U2 district for non-university uses on a trial basis, the decision did not align with the Evanston Comprehensive Plan or our municipal zoning ordinance. The purpose of an amendment is not to confer special zoning privileges, but only to make adjustments necessary in light of the changed conditions. Nothing has changed other than NU has enlarged its physical footprint on the 42 acres over there significantly. Northwestern is a $12 billion corporation which will find every option possible to bring in additional revenue, even at the cost of tax-paying residents and businesses. Following good policy makes for good government, and that's why it's important that the council uphold our codes and our ordinances and apply them uniformly to every entity without favor. There were only 4 standards Northwestern should have met, and that did not happen. They didn't support the neighborhoods. In the comprehensive plan, it didn't support chapters 3 or 6. They did not preserve the quality and integrity of the residential areas. They did not guard against spillover nuisances or resolve boundary issues between residential and non-adjacent residential issues. They did not provide parking that is sensitive to the impact on the neighborhood as stated in the plan, and they did not minimize the spillover. I'm going to skip a bunch. In 1971, Northwestern applied to the city for a permit to host professional and tennis at McGraw Hall. That council denied and used the application because it would alter the essential character of the locality by increasing the intensity, be injurious to and depreciate the property values and improvements in the neighborhood to which it was located, cause traffic congestion, pedestrian traffic, noise litter, all of which would be an unavoidable consequence, and increase danger of fire and public safety by making it more difficult for emergencies to carry out their functions. So I hope that we can get on to good government, good policy, and we will reject this proposal. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. We now move to the remote public commenters, beginning with Leslie Shad.
Thank you so much. So my name is Leslie Shad, and I am in the 3rd Ward. I'm speaking on behalf of Natural Habitat Evanston, and I just want to encourage you to pass the leaf blower ordinance. I know you're considering amendments, but I hope you will pass the ordinance as an important first step. I want to point out it really is important to treat electric leaf blowers the same as gas leaf blowers. Favoring electric leaf blowers creates equity issues and advantages for big companies. I've heard from 3 different Latino managed companies about this, and electric leaf blowers, because they're extremely expensive to buy and maintain, allowing all or no leaf blowers levels the playing field for big and little companies, and eliminates the ability for big companies to get an advantage because they can buy and maintain this expensive equipment. Another reason to treat leaf blowers all the same is that electric leaf blowers still do blast particulates and whatever else is on the ground up for us to breathe. Vibration injuries are still virtually exactly the same. Still devastation to biodiversity, and the noise levels, generally, they are quieter, but they can be as much as 90 decibels, which is as loud as any gas blower. That's according to the online stores that sell them, showing the specifications of the various models. And finally, during the off season, there are a few leaves on the ground. I just don't want us to lose track of the fact that there's a reason that leaf blowers are, discouraged in the summer and fall, basically summer and winter. In the summer, yards tend to be dry and trees hold their leaves. So I almost wonder about charging to tidy when it is unnecessary to tidy our yards. So I out in the end, at the end of the day, hopefully not decades from now, years from now, I think people will have to change the way that they are gardening, or we're really looking at an uncertain future. Anyway, thank you so much for considering. I appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Dr. Clark Elliott.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
You bet.
I'm Dr. Clark Elliott, 40-year resident of Evanston, 6 children through the Evanston schools, a beautiful city that I love. Respected council members and fellow residents, this should take 195 seconds. First, let's be clear. We're talking about unbelievably loud, highly polluting commercial blowers and mowers that run in our neighborhoods for up to 20 hours a week. So, number 1, please go with all electric devices for the good of all of us, the residents, our kids, our neurological systems, landscape workers' health, and our country. We have perfectly viable all-electric commercial battery-powered options now, and we need them. And by the way, they are a lot quieter than than gas-powered devices. Electric is the wave of the future in a world where our country is literally burning up. All car manufacturers are dedicated to an electric future. According to Edmunds engineer Jason Kavanaugh from an extensive 2011 study, 2-stroke leaf blowers are 300 times more polluting than a Ford F-150 truck running down the highway. Let's show leadership in Evanston on this issue. Number 2, if you want business to succeed, you need the rule of law. Move enforcement away from the police, who understandably are not interested in this issue, and to parking enforcement or property standards. They'll do a good job, and once you start giving real tickets, the problem with illegal blowers will be gone in 2 weeks. Never put a business owner in the position where they feel that they are at a competitive disadvantage because some other owner is cheating. True enforcement solves the problem immediately and permanently and is fair for everyone. Number 3, please don't believe the shrill scare tactics about a 60% increase in yard care costs. The numbers don't add up. Gas leaf blowers are currently illegal for 37 weeks of the year, with roughly 26 weeks of landscaping taking place during that time. Yet this has made not the slightest dent in the landscaping business. If sweeping decks and sidewalks with leaf blowers were so critically important, we would have seen a proliferation of blowers being used, yet I've never seen a single one. I agree that blowers are very useful for one spring cleanup a year and 2 or 3 sessions of clearing leaves in the fall. Does 4 or 5 yard sessions out of 26 weeks translate into a 60% increase? It does not. This is propaganda, especially if we change yard care habits. Number 4, please institute a maximum of 3 weeks in the spring for a single cleanup instead of 6.5 weeks that's not necessary, and then 4 weeks in the fall instead of 9.5 weeks that is seriously not necessary. Bunch together the days when yard care is allowed with 2 or 3 rotating days by ward. Virtually every other business runs on a schedule. So we can ask, why shouldn't the landscaping business run on a schedule as well? It doesn't matter if there are 1 instance of
seconds.
yard care noise. Okay, in the fall, leaf blowers run for an hour or more to clean up a single yard, which noise is broadcast for 1/3 of a mile in every direction. By the next day, there are leaves on the lawn. Let's talk about the workers. It's terrible for their health to use these devices.
Time.
I'm skipping ahead to the summary. All electric now, please. It's the right thing to do. 3 weeks of blowing in the spring, 4 weeks in the fall. Limit the days of the week. Fair, real, universal enforcement. Thank you, Evanston.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Rodney Green. Mr. Green, are you there? All right, we'll go back to him if he comes back in the Zoom. Our next speaker is Paul Klitsky.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
All right. Good evening, City Council, Mayor Biss, City Manager, and City Clerk. My name is Paul Klitsky, and I'm the General Manager of Nature's Perspective Landscaping. We have been an Evanston-based business for over 40 years, and our business is located in the 2nd Ward of Evanston. I'm also a 9th Ward resident and a longtime lover of Evanston and all that Evanston has to offer. I'm here to speak about, to urge the City Council, actually, to vote no on the 19021 amending the City of Evanston's leaf blower policy. I have 2 points that I'd like to address with you on this matter to explain kind of my standpoint and our standpoint. First point is basically the economic hardship and impact to our business and fellow landscape contractors. To date, Nature's Perspective has made significant investments in electric battery-powered equipment that's complying with the current leaf blower ordinance. The cost of an electric machine is typically about 2 to 3 times the cost of a gasoline-powered blower or counterpart. We've also made significant capital investments on our propane-powered leaf blowers. We made these investments, to not only meet the requirements of the existing ordinance, but also because that they are significantly quieter, cleaner, and better for the environment than their mixed gas counterparts. Making these investments is difficult and costly, even for a business and company of our size. It would be cost prohibitive for companies that are just getting started or significantly smaller than us to make these investments. These hardships will truly be small in comparison if we must, cancel or restructure our many multi-year contracts that were built on the existing ordinance of utilizing a combination of gas, propane, and electric blowers to service the properties that we maintain. We and other contractors perceive this as potential significant damages to our business if contractual obligations cannot be met. This hardship will only be intensified if the city exempts itself from the new ordinance, thus creating an unfair advantage. Bringing me to my second point, which is exemptions for the City of Evanston, its contractors, school districts, and park district property. In my standpoint in life and philosophy, leadership begins at the top. And if the use of leaf blowers is such an important matter to Evanston residents, the city must be required to follow the same rules and regulations as it's proposing. It's hypocritical for a municipality to carve out exemptions for
15
itself.
seconds.
Yeah, are currently being used on city property and as well as school district property, and they should consider examples like the AZGA, which is the Association of Green Zone Alliances. We propose that the city, its contractors, school districts perform a feasibility study to only using rakes and brooms to maintain its properties. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ben Klitsky.
Good evening, City Council members, Mayor Biss, City Manager, City Clerk. My name is Ben Klitsky from Nature's Perspective. I live and work in the 2nd Ward. I'm asking today that you vote no on Ordinance Amendment 19021. So today, from reading the agenda of the City Council, it looks like you folks are going to vote on and amend multiple contracts and contractual obligations. And in doing so, you're going to fulfill the city's side of these deals. These contracts range from Evanston payroll and bills list. There's an agreement with a software company, Pace Bus. I'm asking that you guys put yourselves in our shoes. Okay, we have contracts with 331 Evanston properties, and these contracts go until mid-December. We have over 24 multi-year contracts that don't expire until 2025. We intend 100% to fulfill these contracts with our clients. But these contracts, they were built on the current leaf blower ordinance. To change this ordinance now in the middle of the season, it's going to make it really difficult for me and my clients, because in order to meet the proposed ordinance, we'll need additional time and additional labor, which costs additional money. The Evanston Environmental Board recommended a phase-out approach for dealing with leaf blowers. They recognize that the 93 licensed contractors, landscape contractors in Evanston, they've got contractual obligations, just like Nature's Perspective and just like the city. Contracts are obligations. They're pacts. They're deals. Please remember the importance of the city of Evanston keeping its side of these agreements, and please keep in mind the difficulty and precarious business climate you create if you force a change in the rules in the middle of the game. Please vote no on 19021 until a reasonable leaf blower plan that does not break existing contracts can be agreed upon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Steve Stratton.
Hi, City Council, Mayor Bliss, City Manager, and City Clerk. My name is Steve Stratton. I work in Nature's Perspective Landscaping. We're located in the 2nd Ward of Evanston. And I'm here today to urge the City Council to vote no on Amendment 19021. I have 2 points that I'd like to talk about. The Evanston Environmental Board, a board of Evanston residents with expertise in various areas of the environment, made recommendations on the use of leaf blowers based on the minutes for the January 11th, 2021 board meeting. This approach was to have gasoline blowers phased out over the next several years and phase in alternatives like electric battery-powered units. The board had a calculated approach that would allow contractors time to adopt alternative equipment that aligns to the code. Their goal was also to give contractors time to properly communicate with their clients and structure contracts to build in the cost of converting to electric-powered equipment. We support the Environmental Board's original recommendations and feel that this is a reasonable approach to the blower issue. A couple of questions that come to mind are, why were the recommendations presented by the board changed and modified? What quantifiable studies have been done in the city of Evanston to consider removing the use of gas, propane, electric, and battery-powered equipment during a large portion of the year? And because we see that the city provided exemptions for themselves, they do seem to realize the value of the tool. This leads me to the next point I had, which is enforcement. Enforcement of the ordinance is already complicated. We are typically targeted as we follow the rules, and we have our logo with our name and phone number on all of our company vehicles. How is it going to be possible to enforce the proposed ban on a company who has no identification and no business license in the city of Evanston? Other municipalities have taken a different approach to working with local contractors to establish solutions that everyone can agree on. Winnetka sent out a pledge of good faith to all landscape contractors registered with the village, and this collaborative and educational approach works, and other communities around the country are also adopting it. Finally, many residents and activist organizations have taken to renegade enforcement. Our employees are exposed to constant harassment and have been verbally and physically assaulted over the use of a blower. The problem will only increase if a new stricter ordinance passes, and we worry about the unintended consequences this will bring to our employees and fellow contractors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mike Vasilko.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor Biss, and thank you, Council. I'm going to rattle through a couple of things. The first one, I'd like somebody to explain in the bills list what the $4 million in debt service interest payments are for, just in broad terms. Is it the Robert Crown Center, for instance? What part of that is for Robert Crown, et cetera? On item A6, aren't we beyond continuing to extend the date of emergency now again until July 12th? Why are we doing that? Everyone's, the governor has said everything's open. We shouldn't be empowering, you, the mayor, or the city manager with any additional governing powers under this item any further, in my opinion. Item A13, I think that's a Trojan horse for staff to go out and issue RFPs and look to sell city property, negotiate prices, et cetera, before citizens have an opportunity to discuss or be brought into the discussion about which properties can be or should be sold. The example earlier today was, well, somebody wants to sell a piece of alley property to a resident because they've kind of used it. Well, that's a small item, but there's nothing in the documentation that says you can't do the same thing with the city council building or a park or some other piece of property. So what's missing in this document is citizen participation at the beginning. We need to be informed before you start negotiating. SP1, I'm not sure why we need to go into a process for a strategic plan now. The previous council never bothered to follow the existing strategic plan. I think this should not be for action tonight. It should be for discussion or introduction and to be voted on at a later time. I'd ask you to vote no on item P5, extending U2 zoning for Northwestern. I'd ask you to allow the leaf blowers to maybe finish this season and then enforce the new rules. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Alan Mulumby. Is Dr. Mulumby in the Zoom? Looks like no. In that case, our next speaker is Dale Bradley.
Hey there. Good evening, City Council, and congratulations on winning all your seats, especially to you, Mayor Biss. You would have made a goddamn good governor, and I'm using your words there, so, go with that. Hey, I've only got 2 areas of expertise. By the way, I live at 2916 Grant Street in the 6th Ward, and my building here is on Central and Central Park, which houses Bradley Investment Center and Flater Plumbing. The other area of expertise I have, besides being a financial advisor for 30 years, is the fact that my father owned a landscape company for 40 years. And all through high school and all through college, I did maintenance, and not just maintenance on homes, but maintenance on commercial buildings. So that's my area of expertise, and I can tell you firsthand that Paul and Ben Klitsky are correct. This equipment, this electric equipment, is simply not up to speed, if you will. It's not ready. For a typical homeowner, if they want to take care of their home and mow the lawn with an electric lawnmower and, push that little bit of grass off or leaves with an electric leaf blower, it's fine. But these crews show up at my house, and I use Nature's Perspective, by the way. They show up at 8 a.m. and they're gone by 9. They're doing 10 to 12 homes a day. Now, we looked up, my son and I looked up, the average runtime of an electric leaf blower is 30 minutes. That's from the New York Times, by the way, October 29th of 2020. You can look it up. What are they going to do? Drag around a truck? A truck will literally have to follow these crews with, a dozen leaf blowers and just keep throwing them out at the guy. The truck itself is environmentally unsafe. So it makes absolutely no sense. For homeowners, yes. Go ahead. I agree. If you're doing your own house, you can do it with an electronic mower. You can do it with an electric leaf blower, but not a contractor. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, let's get to the verbiage real quick of the memorandum and the changes to the ordinance. Now, listen, I love the environment, and I know you do too. We care about it, but this thing is written so silly. Primary concerns raised include noise. If you got a good electric leaf blower, it makes just as much noise as a gas power. It has to.
15 seconds.
From leaf blower use. The negative health impacts. Harm to soil. Dust created. Dust created isn't from a leaf blower. Dust is there. What are we going to do? Ban wind in Evanston? Dust is already there.
Time.
So, it's nuts. Crazy. Contractors can't deal with it. You're going to get a lot of people unemployed, and they're the hardest working people ever.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Kyle Campbell.
Unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
You bet.
All right. So good evening, City Council members and Mayor Biss. My name is Kyle Campbell, and I live in the 3rd Ward. I'm here to discuss a proposed ordinance 19021 about leaf blowers. I encourage the City Council members to adopt the ordinance, and I also encourage the City Council to continue exploration towards an outright year-round ban on all gas and propane leaf blowers. There's not a lack of information or legitimate published research around this topic. The EPA, the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, OSHA, the National Institutes of Health, and the American Lung Association, just to name a few, have published information about the health, pollution, ecological, and noise dangers about leaf blowers, and especially gas leaf blowers. There's also the body of evidence that has been built up over the past several years as communities across the U.S. has implemented stricter bans than what the City Council is considering tonight. The experiences in cities like Berkeley, California, Brookline, Massachusetts, and Washington, D.C. show that these doomsday scenarios floated as potential consequences of leaf blower bans are just simply not true. There's been no plunge in property values, no reports of mass layoffs of landscaping workers, and these cities have not become synonymous with overgrown, out of control built environments. I know the City Council has received these points in letters they've been sent, including the change.org petition that had over 200 Evanston signers. Because there's a wealth of information that's objective already out there about these issues, I want to finish by adding information to this debate that is both local and personal. In mid-May, I called in a violation of the seasonal leaf blower ban by Nature's Perspective at 4:30 in the afternoon. I spent an hour working with the Nature's Perspective workers and the city personnel, filed a complaint. Nature's Perspective knew about the seasonal ban, educated people about the seasonal ban, and they still violated it. The worker said that he felt like he had to use the gas leak blower to complete his daily assignment. He still had 4 more properties to service in just 2 hours that remained until 7 p.m. Last week, at the hearing to adjudicate the citation, there were 3 people present, myself, my wife, and the worker from Nature's Perspective. There were no property owners and there were no company owners present. The worker, through an interpreter, asked for an exception, but he was found liable and his company ordered to pay a $100 fine. Afterwards, I asked the worker through the city-provided interpreter whose pocket the fine was actually coming out of. He stated that he was going to be personally responsible to pay the $100 fine. Because I don't think that it's right that the cost, both in terms of finances and health, is being borne by the person with the least power in this situation, I'm personally reimbursing him for that $100 fine. So that's where we're at with the current realities. Property owners and business owners free from consequence, actual consequences in the form of lung, brain, and ear damage falling to the worker, and neighbors being harassed and having entire summer afternoons delayed. So please adopt this and please consider an outright gas ban year round. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Alex Elliott.
Hello, my name is Alex Elliott from the 3rd Ward, and I wanted to urge the City Council to support Ordinance 19021, amending the City of Evanston's leaf blower policy, and also consider expanding the ordinance to prohibit gas and propane-powered leaf blower use year-round. Many of you probably already know that leaf blowers are so loud that they cause premature deafness in landscapers. Gas-powered leaf blowers in particular expose landscapers to 3 out of the 4 top cancer-causing compounds. Gas, electric, and propane-powered leaf blowers spew cancer-causing particulate matter right in front of landscapers' faces. And when all of that dust settles, cancer-causing particulates smaller than a thread of hair can linger in the air for a week, while children walk through those particulates completely unaware of the damage they do to their developing lungs. Leaf blower noise has also been shown to have a negative impact on learning and cognitive development in children. Health and public safety issues are a major concern when it comes to leaf blowers, but I'd also like to acknowledge that both gas and electric blowers destroy pollinator habitats and the beneficial insects that keep the world going. Leaf blower winds deplete the topsoil that protects our urban canopy, which is critical to Evanston's climate action and
I think you muted yourself, or someone muted you?
you could drive 1,100 miles from Evanston to Houston and produce just as much smog as an hour of a gas leaf blower. So please approve this ordinance, expand the ban, take a stand to show that landscapers' lives are important and climate change is real. Follow the advice of scientists, doctors, acknowledge all the hundreds of signers of our petition supporting the ordinance, and follow other cities that have made progressive moves to save our health and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Nick Korzanowski.
Thank you, Mayor Biss, and good evening. I'd like to first congratulate Luke Stowe on his promotion, and if I could please just take a moment, this being Pride Month, to observe that if you can believe it already, it's been 5 years since the horror at the Pulse nightclub just this past weekend. So I'd like to just have that explicitly stated in council tonight. I'm onto the agenda itself. I'm very encouraged that we've had so many third warders show up with taking the words right out of my mouth on leaf blowers. So I'd actually like to talk about P2, the hazard pay proposal as for action tonight. I feel that there's a real moral argument to be made for this, that as a city, Evanston has the opportunity to say that essential workers are heroes and we stand with them. And I think that that's not nothing for one of those essential workers to hear. I think that by itself is a compelling reason to vote yes. But beyond that, I think the way that this benefit is phrased in the way that it stands for vote tonight is a relatively modest benefit to these workers. There's not a very good dollars and cents reason to vote no on this. We're talking about $250 a month. The back pay does not quite cover 4 months. I've seen large big box stores even offering $1,000 sign-on bonuses to staff up as we reopen. So we're talking about less money than that. We're not talking about breaking anybody's bank. We're just talking about doing right by our essential workers. I don't think there's really a good faith argument against a vote here. So I'd like to not just advocate a yes vote, but a unanimous one if we could. And with that, I will be mindful of our packed time allotment tonight, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Renata Leite-Pittman. Ms. Pittman, are you? No? All right, that brings us to Geeta Maker-Clark.
So the city council is a bunch of...
Or is Geeta Maker-Clark in? No. So just to double check, the people who signed up who we have not heard from are Rodney Green, Alan Malumbi, Renata Pittman, and Geeta Maker-Clark. Last call for any of the 4 of you. Okay, hearing none, that concludes this evening's public comment. And that brings us to special orders of business. Would anyone like to make a motion on item SP1?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I'd actually like to make a motion again. Since we have so many people here for the leaf blower incident and council started quite late, or the leaf blower ordinance, I should say, that we move that to the top of the agenda. So I move that we reorder the agenda to place the leaf blower ordinance. First, to respect residents and the fact that we started council quite late.
Like last time, I'm happy to go with the will of the council. If a majority of the council wants to split the agenda, that's fine with me. If not, we'll not. So if someone wants to make a motion, we can take the roll on that. But I'm not prepared to do that unilaterally without council's approval.
So I make the motion to reorder the agenda to place the leaf blower ordinance discussion first.
So Councilmember Reed moves to switch the order of SP1 and SP2. Is there a second?
That's not SP1. Right. It's P6.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm sorry.
Okay,
To switch to move item P. Thank you, Councilmember Fleming. That's exactly right. To item P6 before the special orders of business.
Yeah, and I would support that because that is almost last on our agenda tonight.
Councilmember Fleming seconds. Would the clerk call the roll?
Alderman Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Aye. Councilmember Ravel. Aye. Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Nguyen.
On this matter, there are 9 voting aye and none voting no. So with no objection, let's proceed to item P6. Would someone like to make a motion on item P6?
I move approval.
Second.
Councilmember Nguyen moves approval of ordinance 19-0-21, amending the City of Evanston's leaf blower policy. Did I hear a second from Councilmember Reed? Councilmember Reed seconds. Is there any discussion? We'll begin with Councilmember Reed.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. The light was.
Oh.
If someone else wants.
Sorry, then Councilmember Ravel.
Sure. Okay. This is a really difficult issue, as you can tell from the public comment. We've had very strong opinions on all sides, and I too have strong opinions on all sides. But the proposed ordinance that's on tonight's agenda is really trying to do too much too quickly. It would regulate all types of leaf blowers, including electric leaf blowers, and would go into effect immediately, eliminating the use of all leaf blowers overnight, since we are currently in the seasonal restricted use months. And I want to draw the council's attention to the really detailed and helpful advisory memo that we received from the Environment Board, recommending that we table the currently proposed amendment. And the memo provided a lot of excellent guidance on how to move forward with this issue that's really very clearly of such huge importance to so many of our residents. So I agree that we should table the proposed ordinance and use the summer months to engage with residents and landscaping contractors to develop a plan and a revised ordinance aimed at achieving our climate action and resilience plan goal to phase out the use of gas and propane-powered leaf blowers, lawn mowers, and construction equipment. And I would recommend that we spend the summer months with a community engagement process and come back to the council with a revised ordinance at our second meeting in September. But there are a couple of things that we can do immediately. First, we must really ensure that we are effectively enforcing our current regulations. And that means that no gas-powered leaf blowers may be used at any time during the summer months. And we need to make sure that we can enforce that regulation that's been on the books for several years. Enforcement now is being handled by the city's property standards inspectors, and it's my understanding that we have hired a 4th inspector so that we have more person power to assist with this effort. Residents are encouraged to report any violations by calling 311, and it is also very helpful if residents would take photos, because that can provide important evidence that will support issuing a citation to the offender. We really need to also be ensuring that we engage the homeowner in this enforcement policy, because they're the ones who are hiring the contractors to do the work. And then secondly, we need to roll out a really strong, multi-pronged educational initiative. So judging from the many emails I've received, and I think my colleagues on the council have received over the last few weeks, there really is, I know ardent people on both sides are going to have a hard time believing this, but there really is a range of views in the community about leaf blowers. And this underscores the need for us to build community understanding about the reasons to further limit the use of leaf blowers in Evanston. So for the many residents who strongly support the proposed amendment and will be disappointed at a decision to delay further regulations, I want to assure you that I do understand the many reasons to reduce and eventually eliminate the use of leaf blowers. I know about the noise, I know about the air pollution, I know about the negative health impacts both on residents and particularly on the landscape workers, and I'm becoming increasingly aware of the ecological damage and the impact that leaf blowers of all types inflict on our insects and our pollinators. So we really need to help all of our residents understand these impacts so that they will want to minimize or eliminate the use of leaf blowers on their own property. So I just want to close on an encouraging note. There are some landscaping companies that are already moving towards more ecological landscaping practices. One large company offers an all-electric service, and there are at least a half a dozen smaller companies that offer an eco service, which means that they will rake the leaves on your property into the flower beds and under the trees rather than carting them all away. So I think with some better effort at community education, we can build greater, stronger support for that kind of an eco service and approach to the landscaping. So now I defer to my colleagues for some comments.
So Councilmember, I want to make sure I understood. Did you move?
I did not move because I know then we can't debate.
Got it. Okay. So the next speakers will be Councilmembers Reed, Wynn, and Fleming in that order. Councilmember Reed.
Yes. I just wanted to bring up some concerns that residents in my ward have raised. One, as Councilmember Ravel noted, I think we do all, understand the whole list, the environmental, ecological, biodiversity, health concerns for both the workers and folks in the area. So I think, understanding that, I think we should make sure that we move forward on this. I would be supportive of moving forward with a version of this today. So I am supportive of moving forward with a few amendments. One in particular is I've had a number of homeowners reach out. We have, while we think, I don't know, at least I'll speak for myself, sometimes I might think of folks who have a lawn care service as folks who are a bit more privileged and have the financial flexibility to afford such a service. There are folks in our community, and I've had a number in my ward reach out who are have the lawn care service because they're disabled or they're seniors and they can't do it themselves. And so I would like to see the penalty placed on the business owner. And I think I remember how we got here with the penalty being placed on the homeowner. I think it was to protect smaller minority and owned landscaping businesses. I think that is not why we landed there. Well, then I guess I do have a question for staff. How did we land on penalizing the homeowners as opposed to the contractors? Or a council member who knows the answer to that? Alderman Nguyen?
Oh, you go ahead.
Or Erica, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Reed. I believe we have Kumar Jensen, our sustainability coordinator, on the Zoom to answer that question.
Good evening. We do not have Kumar. He's on vacation. I'm Kelly Gandersky. I'm Deputy City Manager. Prepared to answer this question. Under the ordinance, our ordinance allows us currently to prosecute the homeowner or the business, depending upon the circumstances. The homeowner is ultimately responsible for the actions that occur on the property.
Oh, okay. Well, I would, I guess I'd still like to see that the penalty would be assessed to the businesses if the homeowners want to pay. Homeowners who can't afford to pay it for the business, I think, can certainly do that voluntarily. But these businesses all have to register for licenses within our city, and so they should be aware of what our rule, if I'm not mistaken, they should be aware of what our rules and regulations are, and held liable for bringing the gas-powered blowers into the city. And then lastly, I'd like to see the city follow the same rules that we're asking other folks to follow. So I think, we certainly should lead by example. So again, I'd almost be prepared tonight to say that the city should start doing this immediately, since we understand the health concerns, and we understand, all the points that we raised, we understand that. So then the city itself should be prepared to end this practice and switch over to the gas leaf blowers. And if we're not prepared to do that, then that should be telling. Those are the issues that I'll raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Next is Council Member Nguyen, and then after Fleming, who I mentioned before, will come Council Members Newsma and Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to agree and second everything that Councilmember Revelle said. I am someone who is opposed to leaf blowers, but I recognize that we have that this ordinance does move very quickly and has not had an opportunity to be aired out with our community members. Councilmember Revelle and I worked together on this issue during a previous council, and I would be very happy to continue our work together to develop an educational program for the homeowners in Evanston, many of whom are unaware of all of the negative impacts. I think they think it's simply noise, and they don't necessarily understand that it's many more things than just noise. So I would like to work on that with Councilmember Revelle, and I do think that we need to phase this in an appropriate way so that everyone is on board and understands why we're making the decision and the importance of the decision. I will say, just to respond to Councilmember Reed, we have always had the ability my understanding, to ticket the homeowner, but for a while it was easier to identify the landscaper, and we never wrote very many tickets for this. I think many landscapers no longer have as much information on their vehicles, but I think the concern was that the landscapers would be at a competitive disadvantage if we find them, but whereas if we find homeowners, then the homeowner is the one who's making the initial contract. So I understand your point about seniors and folks who are disabled, but I do think that if we make proper changes and people understand that they have the ability to, that they can contract with a landscaper and request different things, and perhaps pass on a fine if they receive it to their landscaper. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So I already mentioned that next are Council Members Fleming, Newsma, and Braithwaite. Following them will be Council Member Suffren and then Council Member Kelly. Council Member Fleming.
Thank you. So all the points that have been mentioned, I do agree with that. I think a phased-in approach is good. However, I do understand people have said, we've been talking about this for a while and they think we're ready to go. My concern with going, with as written right away are what Councilmember Reed brought up, which is that, the city and Ridgeville and all of our contractors are exempt from this. And so, again, if we're saying we have to ban this because of all the reasons that have been listed, but then we're not willing to ban our own usage, then I would question how much of a commitment we have to all of those things. Also, I just tried to look real quick on Home Depot, but the cost between gas and electric, maybe for one machine, maybe isn't that big, but if you're looking at, a whole company, that is quite a cost, and they are in the middle of the season, and, probably have had some setbacks maybe because of COVID already. And so I would be concerned with kind of implementing this cost right away, particularly for our smaller business owners. I'd be much more curious to see, how that kind of shook out for them and who we might potentially, not necessarily put out of business, but maybe put out of business here in Evanston. I know I've had lots of residents call me as well, and their points, some of them have been that people can rake their yards, and everybody, for the reasons that Councilmember Reed brought up, cannot rake their yards. And so I don't think that we should go to this extreme where you can't have a mower. As loving as people tend to be in Evanston, I can just imagine a scenario where someone is not raking or mowing, and then they're having property standards call on them because their grass is too long and all those different things. So I think there's, two sides to every coin here. So I think that a more gradual phasing in of this makes more sense, particularly because we're getting ready to be at the end of the season. I would like, whenever we get to this point, I think enforcement for me is going to be huge, because although, as you said, it's property standards, most of the time people are still calling the police, or at least calling 311. The companies don't necessarily have the signage, as you mentioned, Councilperson Nguyen. But then I still find that neighbors are, for the most part, unwilling to just go talk to their neighbors and say anything about it, right? So it falls on our staff. And the gentleman who mentioned that our parking enforcement could do this, while I imagine they could, I don't know if you've ever seen them give a ticket to someone who's mad about getting a parking ticket. So I would just feel really bad for that staff when they then knock on your door and try to give you a ticket for something a lawn person did, who they can always say they didn't know, or whatever the case is, right? So I'm just really mindful about enforcement, and that's probably the biggest concern that people have in my ward, is they say, hey, I'm calling, no one's coming. By the time the person gets here, the lawn company's gone. But they're still missing that neighbor to neighbor conversation. And I do think, at least in my experience, it seems to have gotten worse because we've all been home for a year. And so now everyone feels like it's so loud. I would just tell you personally, I don't think it's any louder than a lawnmower. I could just be not as sensitive in my hearing. But lawnmowers, kind of the weed whackers, they all seem to be very loud to me, and they all seem to kick up a lot of dust. And this is coming from someone who has one in my house. So I think if we're really going to do this for all the environmental reasons we mentioned, we probably want to look at every piece of equipment. I'm not sure why it's just the leaf blower and I haven't done a scientific study on it, but it seems to be the leaf blower is the largest target. But when I'm outside and the lawn company's there's a ton of dust from the weed whacker and the edger and all those things too. So, if we could figure out a way to enforce better for this season, that would be great. And then do all of the community engagement and education, and allowing our companies in town, plus the ones who operate in town, to go ahead and change their equipment for the next year. That makes more sense. I just hate to penalize companies that are already going, again, the smaller ones that might be struggling from loss of business during the pandemic, to now have to make more purchases mid-year, and potentially customers, losing customers because they can't kind of keep up what we're asking. So those are my suggestions for, I guess, Councilmember Nguyen and Rebel, who are taking the lead on this one. And happy to also help host a meeting in my ward or something as we talk about this more.
Thank you. Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will underscore some previous comments and add a few more thoughts of my own. I would like to point out that in the fall of 2018, the City Council at the time unanimously approved the Climate Action and Resilience Plan, our famous CARP document, which very clearly calls for the phasing out of fossil fuel powered leaf blowers, as well as lawnmowers and construction equipment, to Councilmember Fleming's point. That was 3.5 years ago. It's time for us to start phasing them out. We've had ample opportunity to consider that. So I would like to move forward and make some concrete steps. Having said that, I think that the ordinance in front of us tonight, as drafted, does leave some things to be desired. There is some disconnect between this draft and what the Environment Board had recommended, and that gets to Councilmember Ravel's point about public engagement, about education. I don't like the fact that the city is exempting itself from the ban, and I think the city in this case, as in many other cases, should lead by example. I also want to talk about enforcement, and so this is a question for staff. Which department is currently tasked with enforcing the leaf blower ordinance?
Good day, members of City Council. Ike Ogbo, Director for the Health and Human Services Department. The Health and Human Services Department is responsible for the enforcement of leaf blowers. Due to the pandemic, our Property Maintenance Division enforced the leaf blower ordinance because of how involved we were in our COVID response. But recently, we have absorbed those responsibilities, and we continue to enforce the leaf blower ordinance from the Health and Human Services Department.
How many employees are available to perform this task, or will be available once COVID is over?
Well, the department has 3 inspectors who also conduct other inspection activities, such as food inspections, lead assessments, beach water quality, and of course, the leaf blower ordinance. We do have 3 inspectors. Currently, we have 2. We're looking to hire an additional inspector to aid in our enforcement activities. So yes.
Thank you. So it's not the police. Do the police have any specific instructions as if how to handle a leaf blower complaint if they should receive one?
Typically, when we get a complaint that is not during our operation hours, the police has helped in responding to these complaints. The police will engage and talk to them about the ordinance, those who are aware of the ordinance. What we do eventually is send a notice to those companies reminding them of the ordinance, and we also send a copy of the ordinance with a letter to the property owner, which illustrates what the ordinance states.
Thank you. So just to clarify, the inspectors charged with enforcing this ordinance are in the health department, not building inspectors who are doing plumbing and electrical inspection, that type of stuff. Just for my own clarification.
Yes. During COVID, they assisted the Health and Human Services Department due to our ample involvement in COVID-19, but recently it is under our charge to enforce this ordinance.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I close my comments, I would just like to offer a suggestion. I'm not posing this as a motion at the moment, but in respect of Councilmember Ravel's desire to engage in some more public discourse on this, I support that. But in order to show, we're actually making some movement, I would like to, at the very least, extend the ban on gas-powered leaf blowers until October 15th. I'm offering that as an idea, not as a motion at this point.
Thank you. Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm going to wrap up by, summarizing some things. First of all, thank you very much, Alderman Ravel, for your, thoughts and methodology and approach to this. I support your direction. The complaints that I hear from a majority of my residents is not the noise, but the actual contractors that live within the footprint of the second ward. And so I don't know how and why, but we have a lot of local contractors that live in the ward. So the complaints that I hear is not the noise, but it's just the trucks. And as a result of that, I've heard from the contractors. And so I would say to you and anyone else who isn't paying attention and think that the prices are not going to increase, it's true. I have heard that. You've heard the testimony or the comments from Nature's Perspective, who is in the middle of their season. And I think it's so important that as we listen to the residents, we don't forget the fact that they're businesses that also live in here in town. So thank you very much for speaking up, and I think that that's a perfect middle ground. I think I've heard it before, and it's worth saying when you come back with this to council, who is going to do the enforcement is important as we are talking about what police reform looks like and all those other things. I mean, we need to figure that piece out. You know, who is going to actually enforce this when we come back with it? And then I do think that there should be a very clear focus, and I think Alderman Fleming may have said this, on the signage of the trucks. I think that's very inconsistent across, that I notice across Evanston, that some people have very clear signage with a phone number with a owner's name on it, and there are other businesses that don't. And I think if you include that, that will also be helpful in terms of the enforcement. So I hope that everybody's taken this cue, and we're going to take our time and approach this wisely, because it will impact Black and brown families, and that isn't anecdotal. That's a real statement, and that information is collected from the contractors who live in my ward. So thank you very much, Alderman Fell.
Thank you very much. Next is Councilmember Suffredin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Everyone said everything, so I just want to point out, like, it doesn't matter what we come up with. Enforcement is all that really matters. That's the most common complaint I get, that we're not enforcing what exists, so we're going to need to step that up. Anyway, it's mostly a noise issue. To Alderman Fleming's point, you know, I can buy a very old lawnmower, fire that thing up, and just have it idle on my front lawn all day, and there's nothing prohibiting us from doing that. Leaf blowers aren't the only noise makers. We should look at the thing holistically. And we also, from what I've heard from residents in my ward, we need to have some sort of reasonable understanding of people who use plug-in 7-amp blowers to clear off their patio furniture or things like that. I mean, we can't. The commercial thing is a different subject. It's all the same thing, and it comes down to noise and being considerate of neighbors. But there are people who, for whatever reason, need to use low-powered leaf blowers intermittently to do things. So we need to be reasonable about that. And to the extent that we know who has landscaping business in Evanston, and to the points that were made by Alderman Braithwaite and by Nature's Perspective, we need to let them know now that next year's contracts are going to be different. Whatever we're going to phase in will cost them money, so they should be advised not to enter into any agreements that are going to be problematic based on whatever we come up with, and we need to be very reasonable about the cost of equipment and phasing it in. So those are my only points. Thank you to everyone else. It's the nice thing about going 7th. Everyone's pretty much said everything, so I'm done.
Well, I mean, if going 7th is good, you're better off going 8th, like Councilmember Kelly.
Just as a point of information, has the city taken any measures since 2019 to move towards the elimination of the leaf blowers? I mean, has there been any effort?
So what we have done is, at the suggestion of the Environment Board, we now require all landscaping companies doing business in Evanston to register with the city. Once again, we need to enforce that better. And one of the requirements in that registration application is the company needs to supply a photo showing their business and phone number on their vehicle. And so we clearly have a lot of landscaping companies doing work in the community that are not complying with our request to have them register. And the reason to have the businesses register with us, it's a way for us to remind them about our regulations. It's a way for us to get in touch with them about promoting greater ecological services. If we can come up with some ways to incentivize the landscaping companies to move towards more ecological practices, this will be a way to reach them with that kind of information. So it's a really key step, but we need to enforce it.
Thank you. Thanks for going over all that. And I apologize. What I meant also is our city services. What have we done with the city of Evanston in terms of our own landscaping to move away from leaf blowers? Have we done anything?
No. All I can do, I know the Environment Board has done some interviews, including interviews with our Greenways staff, and to find out what the the challenges are for the city to move in the right direction, and it's big hurdles in terms of equipment.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think Dave Stonebeck is on the line. He can talk to this as well. But there's two main issues as it pertains to the city's operation in this area. For one, we have a pretty significant investment in the equipment that we currently use. We're trying to phase that out as it breaks down or needs to be replaced, and we replace it with the electric equipment. We also want to do sort of a pilot to see how much additional staff hours would be required if we were to use the electric versus the gas equipment. We do want to lead by example. We are trying to enforce this in the city, but we also are, one of the largest property owners in the city, and as such, when we are cleaning up a large park like James Park or other parks, it's a different story than if you're just taking care of your own personal private lawn. So there are additional considerations that staff is looking at as it pertains to, do we need additional staffing in order to be able to accommodate this for ourselves, and what additional equipment investments need to be made. All of those things we'll be talking about as we budget for 2022 when we get to budget season.
Are we also considering just maybe leaving leaves on the ground?
Absolutely, except for as it relates to areas where they need to be cleared, and play surfaces and soccer courts, things like that.
And I'm sorry, last point of information. And for the public schools, how does that work in terms of an ordinance? Are they exempt automatically, or
the ordinance as it's proposed currently does exempt the school district, but that would be something that for the additional policy consideration for the council to consider.
I had one other point just to explain. We were discussing this before the pandemic hit, but after COVID hit, there was a recognition. I remember having this discussion with Kumar that landscaping workers were considered essential workers, and there was a concern that if we made significant changes in the leaf blower ordinance and some of these other the leaf blower ordinance overwhelmingly was that we were going to cause companies to go out of business, and we were going to cause people to lose their jobs. And at the time, landscaping workers were still working. And so we did take that into effect. At least I had discussions with staff about the concerns about potentially putting people out of work during COVID, but recognizing that when COVID was over that we would get back to this.
Okay, the last speaker in the first round, and there are two people who've asked to speak again, but the last speaker in the first round is Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, just wanted to get some clarity. So our existing leaf blower policy, does it already say that you can use both electric and gas powered leaf blowers during the unrestricted period? It says that. And then it also says that you cannot use either one during the restricted periods, right? Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Our current ordinance says only gas-powered leaf blowers are the ones that are prohibited during the seasonal ban.
Okay.
You can use
an electric right now.
You can use an electric one or a propane leaf blower year-round.
Okay.
Currently.
Okay. So that's helpful. I wanted to say, so during the campaign, I talked a lot to folks in the environmental community, and also talked to Kumar Jensen. And over, what I heard were really primarily three things, which were educational initiative, yes, but also that we probably need to hire additional staff to support implementation. Kumar specifically talked about the need to hire a technical assistance person that could help with this type of implementation that we're talking about right now. And he also talked about somebody that could play point on a subsidy program that can help some of our smaller landscaping operators adjust to this kind of new policy. And I don't see any of that, so I think for me, while I definitely support what the intent of this policy, I'm really looking for us as a council, if we are interested in doing this work, to really fully support it and fund it, so that it doesn't negatively impact the folks that I think we're all sworn here to protect. But it looks good. It's just we have not built the infrastructure out to support this level of implementation, and I think we need to do that.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember. So everyone has spoken once. Councilmembers Reed and Kelly have requested to speak again. They'll be called on next in that order. By rule, any of the other 7 of you can speak a second time if you so desire. I would just respectfully call our attention to the time. We've got a long agenda ahead of us, and see if we can bear that in mind. Councilmember Reed is next.
I will defer my comments.
Councilmember Kelly.
So just in addition to the city developing a plan to eliminate or to reduce or, to hold good on, to lead by example with reducing our own gas-powered leaf blowers, I'd also ask that the city work with all the variety of companies, both small and large companies, landscape companies, to determine what kind of costs would be incurred so that we can educate homeowners about the additional, what they should be able to expect in additional cost. I think that that's really important, that, so there aren't hardships levied against the workers, so that we have a full understanding as to what the additional cost, what additional hours would be involved. So if it's 15% or 10 to 20%, I think the city should also be educating homeowners about those additional costs that they should be expected.
Thank you. So that exhausts everyone who's seeking recognition. So I would entertain a motion if someone wanted to make a motion, or if not, then we'll vote on the original motion.
I would like to make. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to make one amendment to the current ordinance, which extends the ban from September 30th, strike September 30th and make that October 15th. Just as a demonstration of the direction that we intend to head. I think that is the consensus of the council.
Second.
So just to be clear, you are amending this ordinance to delete everything except all that would be in it would be the current code would remain as is, except that window would be moved from what to what?
Strike September 30th, that becomes October 15th.
Okay, so does everyone understand the motion?
I do, but that's what's in the packet now.
Along with a whole bunch of other stuff that.
Right, I know. I just wanted to make clear because you said strike that, but the date is already striked at the packet.
Right, striking it from the existing ordinance, not this proposed draft.
You said it much more clearly than me, Councilmember.
Okay.
You're right.
Yeah, so I'm confused now.
So it's to extend the summer ban from September 30th to October 15th.
While removing everything else that's in this proposal.
Yes.
Councilmember Nguyen seconds. And so now on this proposed amendment, Councilmember Reed.
To be clear, I think the motion is, I think what Alderman Flynn, or Councilmember Flynn was saying is the motion isn't it's to strike everything else, just.
That's
okay. So, and I'm curious what this, if we're, what is the accomplishment of extending it 15 days?
A show of good faith that we intend to move in the direction of, eventually implementing a phase out of all gas-powered leaf blowers. And we want to make sure that we come back to this as Councilmember Revelle has suggested and do our public engagement over the summer. And so I'm not sure what that looks like in the context of this motion. Perhaps that's a separate referral, but that is,
yeah, I mean, so you have we have a choice. I'm just chairing. I'm not going to vote. You all have a choice before you. You can either pass some form of this, and then you've done a thing, but then you've left sort of hazy the question of what the next steps are, or you can do as Councilmember Revelle proposed and not pass anything, but table it to a date certain. I believe she proposed the fourth Monday of September. So we don't have the concrete immediate step, but we have a date certain at which we come back and deal with perhaps improved version. So those are two options. If you vote yes on the NUSMA amendment, then the first choice goes. If not, then the second choice.
Are they mutually exclusive?
Yeah.
I withdraw my second.
Thank you.
I'll withdraw the motion then.
Thank
you.
So the motion is withdrawn. Councilmember Fleming.
I had another amendment, but I'm a little bit lost as to where we are. So maybe we're back to this original one.
We're back to the original.
Okay.
So it could be amended or it could be tabled.
Right. So I guess I was moving more towards if we're trying to do something now in a good faith effort, I'm fine with October 15th as was suggested earlier, but I would move to change the time. So now it's Monday through Friday, 7 to, it was 7 to 9, and here it's proposed as 7 to 4. 4 seems like a little bit aggressive because, again, if we're talking about the noise complaints, which I'm assuming we all hear, I would much rather change the time than the time of day they can be used, right? So 7 a.m., everyone's home. Some people feel like that's really early. So maybe we move it from, 8 to 4 or 9 to 5, something more like a regular day, so that maybe we can cut back on some of the noise complaints. I know there's a lot of other complaints, but a lot of the complaints are about noise. And so having a leaf blower go at 7 a.m. is much different than having a leaf blower go at 9 a.m. Again, doesn't cut out all of the other issues with the leaf blowers, but at least does give maybe some relief there. And definitely would, I would be okay with 8 to 4 or 9 to 5, something more of the reasonable hours that people expect for work to be happening.
So are you?
So I would make a motion then that, again, it's to strike everything except for the days of the week, the time of usage. So it'd be Monday through Friday, and I would say 8 to 4 p.m. would be my initial motion.
Is there a second? Is there a second for Councilmember Fleming's motion?
I will second it if we can make a friendly motion. I think your 9 to 4, 9 a.m. So I'll second it.
Councilmember Reed seconds the motion. Prior to the motion being made, Councilmembers Wynn and Revelle were seeking recognition. Do you want to speak now?
Yes, I do.
So Councilmember Wynn is next.
Yes. I will say Alderman Revelle and I had a discussion earlier today, and we were very concerned about making amendments to this ordinance, which we all are acknowledging is imperfect and not well thought out. So I would urge us to follow what Alderman Revelle's original suggestion, which is to hold this until the second meeting in September and then come back with a comprehensive ordinance that addresses all of these issues. So, while I appreciate what you were suggesting, Councilmember Fleming, and those were things that initially I looked at as well, but I think rather than make small adjustments, I think a better way to approach this is to come back with something comprehensive that we prepare with input from all of the landscaping companies and the stakeholders.
Councilmember Revelle?
Councilmember Wynn said exactly what I was going to say, which is, there are a lot of little tweaks that I think we could make to this right now, going back to the one that Councilmember Nusma suggested earlier, and I think we'll have a better product if we take our time and look at all the different aspects of it and come back in September.
Councilmember Kelly.
So if I understood correctly, Councilmember Nusma, the idea was to strike the entire thing and just extend it to October 15th. So in essence, we would be coming back in September or at another date with a whole new ordinance, right? We would be striking.
I think the main idea is I want to make sure we come back to this by a date certain. And as I understand our procedure, the easiest way to do that is to do nothing to this particular proposal other than to hold it until a date certain, rather than make some minor tweaks around the edges, and then I'm not sure what the process looks like. That could just be my
It could still be brought back. We could still bring an ordinance forward. Just because you extend it to, strike everything on this one and extend it to the 15th doesn't preclude us from putting a new ordinance, because we want a whole new one on the books for the 15th.
Yeah. And I'll also point out that if we take this up again in September, we can at that point extend the the summer deadline, the summer hours until October 15th. So we're not losing anything by waiting, at least with my concept.
Councilmember Fleming, followed by Reed.
Sorry, that's in my last point. So I understand now the October piece if we're coming back at the end of September, but that doesn't, in my opinion, still help to give some relief of folks who are still concerned about the time of day these things are operating, right? So again, my point, 7 a.m. is very early, and so if we want to give some relief, we're not getting to the whole larger global picture. But if we went from like a 9 to 5, it just makes, a little more sense. I think this 7 o'clock, Manager Stoley, that's the time that contractors can start working on other projects around town. I also think that's pretty early, but, just to give people that noise relief at least for now. I imagine for nature's perspective and all those other people, they might not still be so happy about that, but they don't have to go out and buy new equipment. They just have to kind of arrange their schedules a little different to get through their houses or their clients a little bit more efficiently.
Well, there is a ban on right now until September 30th. So those the adjustment to the hours would only apply.
Okay, so I will leave it then as we will come back in September. I can withdraw my motion.
So Councilmember Reed Fleming withdraws her motion, and Councilmember Reed is next in line to speak.
I'm sorry.
It's your turn.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, the motion's been withdrawn, but I do believe that, similar to what Alderman Newsom's original point was, and just like we did with the beach tokens, we can say that we're going to move forward with making some minor changes now, and with the understanding that we're coming back to it. And I do think extending, Alderman Newsom's original proposal to extend to October, or not really his proposal, but it's already in the ordinance. So the ordinance eliminating everything else except for the extension to October 15th, and Alderman Fleming's proposal here, which would change the hours, which I think even now the hours an electric powered gas or an electric powered blower would allow for, or the current ordinance would allow for an electric powered blower to operate during, 7 a.m. Is that correct? So I think if we change the hours, it would still change whether or not that electric or propane blower could operate during those hours. So I will actually remake the motion to change the hours to 9 to 5, extend it to October 15th, and have the understanding, just like we do with beach tokens, that we're coming back to it in September.
So Councilmember Reed moves to, as I understood it, essentially combine the two previously withdrawn motions, one to extend the date and one to extend the hours. Is that correct, Councilmember?
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Councilmember Kelly seconds that motion. Is there any discussion on that motion, on that amendment? So hearing none, let's have a vote on Councilmember Reed's amendment to the underlying ordinance. Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
No.
Councilmember Wynn?
On that matter, there are 8 voting aye, 1 voting no, and so ordinance 19-0-21 is hereby amended. And now I would again entertain any motion.
I call the motion that we, I guess there's no further debate.
Is there any further discussion?
No.
Okay.
Only that it's 9 o'clock and we haven't even hit our first council agenda item. So let's move forward.
Well, I'm trying to be respectful of the sponsor who indicated an intention, but understanding that she seems, understanding that no one is seeking recognition, would the clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin? Aye. Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming? Aye. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye. I have no idea what I'm voting on, but that's fine. Aye.
Councilmember Wynn? Aye.
So on this matter, there are 9 voting aye, none voting nay, and so the amended version of Ordinance 19-0-21 passes, which allows us to move forward. Thanks all. So let us move forward now to item SP1 on the agenda. For this, let me turn it over to the city, Deputy City Manager Kimberly Richardson is here to give a presentation.
Yes, and to be mindful of the time, I will be
Oh,
brief.
forgive me. We need to introduce the item. Would someone make a motion?
I'd like to move item SP1, Planning for the City of Evanston Strategic Plan and Comprehensive Plan Process. This item's for action.
Is there a second? Second. So Councilmember Braithwaite moves item SP1. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Deputy City Manager Richardson.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor Biss, members of the City Council, Clerk Mendoza, City Manager Storley, Kimberly Richardson, Deputy City Manager. I will keep my comments brief, understanding the time. I just want to bring us to the strategic plan and the comprehensive plan. In 2006, the City Council approved the last comprehensive strategic plan. The plan was developed over a 9-month period, and the purpose of that strategic plan was to provide the city with a guiding document, setting priorities for the next 5 years. It's now 15 years later. Typically, a city plan is updated every 3 to 5 years with an annual review. Prior to the strategic planning process, the city also underwent a comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2000. It focused on development, transportation, and discussed housing and economic development practices that are no longer in place. This plan is now 21 years old. Communities generally update their comprehensive plans every 10 to 15 years. Strategic planning and visioning is the process of the City Council. In a result of this process, it will provide a clear vision for where the city strives to be in the next 3 to 5 years. It will create a multi-year work plan that will take in consideration government services and resource allocation. But most importantly, it will involve a community engagement process that goes beyond just a few meetings. A comprehensive plan is also one that will allow for community development to be able to develop a plan for community development that can be implemented, building a community that meets the goals of a complete community for all individuals, bringing together energized voices and advocates seeking improvement and to improve aspects of life in Evanston, and an updated plan that is focused on the people that live, work, and visit, and how they inhabit the city. Investing in a plan, there is a cost. What that cost is, right now, we don't have an answer because, again, we have not undertaken this process in over a decade. For those communities that do have an annual or has a strategic plan that is on a multi-year process, it's less costly. We see that between 60 to 100,000, even less. But because we have not taken the time to do a plan and evaluate that, we're looking at the plan could be between 60,000 to 200,000. But one thing that we do know is if we combine both the planning process for the comprehensive plan as well as the strategic plan, we should see a reduction in costs due to redundancy of some of the community engagement and outreach. If the City Council tonight allows us to move forward with putting out an RFQ or a P, we will look to see this going issued at the end of June of end of this month, with hopefully a tentative award coming back to City Council in August or early September. At that point, we will provide City Council with a implementation schedule with the hopes of having the strategic plan and the comprehensive plan completed before the 2023 budget planning process. With that, are there any questions that I can entertain this evening?
Are there any questions? Councilmember Reed.
I just want to note that I would like to see us review the previous plans, and I think even before we go forward with a new plan, I think we should look back and see if we've actually followed the last plan. So this is a $200,000 expenditure for a plan that just ends up on the shelf. And especially if it's going to be done in 2023, I think we're potentially, we could all be out of here, a year after that with the elections. And so.
So to your point, Councilmember Reed, the plan itself, if we're talking about today being, 2021, and if this goes into some form of implementation, you're looking at the end of 2021, 2022, beginning of 2022. Our budgeting process typically begins in August of 2022. So the hope is that we will have something prior to the beginning of that so that it can lead and give some guidance to priorities for which you would then be utilizing as part of the budget process. The idea of a strategic plan is that it isn't sitting on a shelf. If done correctly and with appropriate individual or company, the plan really should be what everyone, including staff, is utilizing.
Just in the interest of time. I totally understand that. I get that. My comment was just that, it shouldn't be. But the question is, were the previous plans, and what can we learn from the fact, if they were items that were developed and just sat on a shelf, what can we learn from that going into this process? So that was my comment.
I understand. Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Fleming.
Oh, I just was going to say I'm in huge support of this. I tried to get, I brought this up my first term in office because I had read the plan and it is old, and I think there were some things that were done and some that weren't. I have no idea, why those decisions were made, but part of that is because it was so old that, there's no way to know, right? So I am in huge support of this. So hopefully we can find someone, we can get it done, and, I will not be here, but whoever else is here for the next term will have some place to start that's better than where we were able to start just because we didn't have anything to start with. And I think with all the community members who are constantly talking about wanting to have more input, this is a way for them to do it. And then if we do the yearly update, we can update the community on what we did do, what we didn't do, why, what our plan is going forward. And ideally, the next councils going forward will have less tension in their community because people will have had a chance to kind of see where they're trying to go.
Does anyone else have any questions? All right, I have one quick question. I share Councilmember Fleming's view. This is very important, and the current comprehensive plan, I've kind of told people it looks to me like it's from a different planet, not just a different decade. My one question, though, is we're initiating this conversation right after an election. There's a lot of newly elected people up here who made a number of promises to their constituents, and I'd like a little bit of clarity on how the vision of the folks who were elected, the 10, 11 of us, or at least the 10 or 11 of us who were elected recently on policy platforms would be incorporated into this process, so we don't wind up with tension between one set of commitments and a different set of commitments, which I think would leave us in the exact position that's been alluded to already of, oh, hey, here's a cool document that we're all going to wind up ignoring.
Sure. To that point, Mayor Biss, I would say that, one, what makes this unique is that I would advocate for this process to be driven by a racial equity process, one that ensures that voices that typically are not heard or part of the conversation is incorporated. This is the City Council's vision. This is a visioning document that you all will have to work together collaboratively to come to what the City Council wants to see, the vision and the mission of the city moving forward for the next 3 to 5 years. The hope is that you're informed by the community engagement efforts that are going to be a part of this process. And if it's confirming what you already know, that's great. We can then move forward with the goal setting, and then the actions are what we as city staff will have to come back to you with to ensure that those are being developed and being prioritized appropriately. What I would say to that, if you bring in the right appropriate person who can help facilitate that dialogue with both City Council, senior staff, as well as the community, you will get alignment somewhere. Now, does that mean campaign promises are going to be met? I don't know, because to be honest with you, that has to be what the process looks like. It doesn't, it's not dictated on what people promise. It's dictated on what community input and City Council collaboration is going to look like.
Great, thank you. Seeing no further questions, will the clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Aye. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming. Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
With 9 voting yes, none voting no, SP1 passes. That brings us to SP2. Would anyone like to make a motion on this item?
Ordinance 60-0-21, creating Title 12 workers' rights of the City of Code and mandating hazard pay for certain employees.
Councilmember Braithwaite moves SP2. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Reed seconds, and the first person seeking to speak is Councilmember Reed.
Oh, okay. Actually, I was seeking recognition to make the motion, but I will.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you? Okay. Well, in that case, no one seems to be seeking recognition to speak.
I just thought Alderman Braithwaite moved it. If he wanted first right at it.
Do you want to jump in?
I mean, I can. I shared my comments earlier, and my thought process and methodology hasn't changed. I have a number of businesses that are in my ward that I have heard from that have already participated in the hazard pay when there was a hazard. I've shared, and my comments haven't changed. We're now open, and we're moving beyond the recovery phase. I think if we want to take a look at this at a later date, I'd be happy to entertain it. But given the fact that we have a number of businesses that closed, we have a number of businesses that have already participated, I think the urgency of this has passed, and my concern would be how to enforce it, and I don't feel like I have enough data to even make an educated thought on this moving forward. So I understand the intent, and I have more questions than I do answers, and I would respectfully request at this late hour that we consider holding this over to a later date for more information and continue to move forward with our agenda, Mr. Mayor.
Our next speakers in order are council members Reed, Nguyen, and Fleming.
Well, I will say that we haven't had any of the businesses that will be impacted by this close, so I'm not sure where that's coming from. But Alderman Nusma put together a spreadsheet that, or maybe an intern did, someone put together a spreadsheet that lists all of the businesses that would be impacted by this. Again, these are large corporate food retailers, grocery stores, so it's Walgreens, Target, Valley, Whole Foods, all of that stuff. So I will say that there are a number of issues. I know that I got an email from Council Cummings. We had a meeting a week ago. I know there's an issue with there's some amendments to the draft that we discussed that didn't make it in because of there's an issue with losing the draft. So I understand that. My intention was not to have some of the changes that we discussed would have been to not have this apply retroactively, as to lessen the chance of a lawsuit coming our way. And so, given that there are a few edits that did not make it into the new draft, I'm willing to hold this for a meeting if someone wants to make that motion.
Did he say it is willing or not?
I don't think a special order of business can be held, can it?
No.
By suspending the rules. It can't be held through the...
No.
Why are we saying this? No.
I mean, what do you mean by suspend the rules to what?
To allow for the hold.
Who knows the rule? Where are we at? Come on, it's late.
Corporation Counsel Nicholas Cummings. Rule 1812 prohibits holding a special order of business. Councilmember Reed, if he moves to suspend the rules to allow that to happen, it requires a unanimous vote of the council in order to suspend the rules for that to happen.
Or we can just vote on it as it was brought to us.
Well, okay. Well, I'm happy. I would like to make an amendment then. I will let other council members speak first, and then I'll make a few amendments to tighten it up.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Well, as I said when this was originally brought up, there has to be a process. There have to be stakeholders engaged. We need to have an understanding of the impact. And from the correspondence I've received from the businesses in town, none of them have been contacted by you, Councilmember Reed. That's my understanding. And where has the meeting? Have you had a meeting with any of these large businesses? Alderman Newsma may have a spreadsheet, but it hasn't been shared with any other member of the City Council. I have not been contacted to tell me what is going on, to let me know that there has been a public process and who has come to it. Whether we've heard from employees here in Evanston. We have, because I reached out and got in touch with some of these businesses to let them know that this was happening, and they've written back. But I have not seen any correspondence from you about your reaching out to any of these businesses and letting them know and having them participate in the process. We've just spent an hour discussing changing our leaf blowing ordinance and deciding to hold it, even though every single one of us up here sees the value in prohibiting leaf blowers, but we recognize that we have stakeholders in this community who will be negatively impacted, and we want to make sure they get to participate in a process. There was no process here. This is not how we produce good government or develop good policy or pass good ordinances. We should vote this down tonight. I mean, to have you tell us now that you have several amendments, those should have been passed out to all of us. We should all have that. And if I sound frustrated, I am frustrated. These are all issues that were raised on May 10th, more than a month ago, where those of us on the council urged you to engage in this process. I've heard nothing. I have only heard from the businesses who are all telling me they did have hazard pay. They held on to their employees through the COVID, that many of them provided extra benefits for their employees through this. And they are startled that the City Council would engage in such activity without talking to them beforehand. So I think tonight we should vote this down right now.
Councilmember Fleming.
I have a couple questions. So the edits that you spoke about, they are not in the packet, but they have been discussed with you and Council Cummings.
That's correct, Councilmember Fleming. I had a meeting with Councilmember Reed. I was making inline changes during the meeting. I don't know what happened to that document. I went on vacation, came back to try and make sure it made it into the packet for tonight, and those changes were not there. And so I made the changes that I could remember. But for example, the retroactivity was not supposed to be there, and it is in there right now.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. So I think to Council Reed's point, I mean, it sounds like there was some kind of technical error. It wasn't that he had not met with the staff to make the edits. So I had a question. The first night we talked about this, which was how are we going to handle our staff? And I'd asked City Manager Storley to speak on that, not in grave detail and not very long, given the hour, but if you can just talk through the American Rescue Act and what it allows us to do for our, I guess I would call them frontline staff, for lack of a better term.
Thank you, Councilmember. I first wanted to just opine on the conversation that just happened. So typically before we spend staff resources to change or update an ordinance, it would be preferable if the direction came from a consensus of the council versus just one council member, because we don't want to take the liberty of incorporating one person's changes over another person's changes without knowing if that's the direction of the council. So going forward, preferably we have a direction that we discuss publicly, and then those edits are incorporated, and then we bring them back. So that's what hopefully we can work towards in the future. The question about city staff. So staff has done a full analysis of the American Rescue Plan Act and what the provisions are for premium pay for essential workers. Essential workers are defined by the CEO of the corporation or myself, so we've already made determinations about who's eligible in our organization, and we've already done an analysis of how much money each one of those workers could potentially get and what kind of program we could put in place. I would like to have a full discussion with the council about that when the time is right. There are some eligibility requirements that not all of our workers meet in terms of a cap on wages. So there is a cap. Some of our workers are above that cap, and so we're waiting for additional guidance from Treasury about whether or not we can get an exception for those and if that would be allowable. So we're looking forward to having that discussion at some point in time. But like I said, we have done the analysis and we're ready to have that conversation.
And so given that analysis, it sounds like it would be safe to assume that your plan moving forward is some type of hazard pay for some type of staff as eligible.
It's going to be a recommendation, and I believe it's already been brought up by several members of the council that that's something that we'd like to discuss. Okay. So when we get to talking about how we're going to allocate the Rescue Plan Act funds, this would be a part of the city finances component. We've talked about these 4 buckets of things that are eligible. So yeah, that would be a topic that we'd want to discuss at that point in time.
Okay, and then just 2 more things. I do want to just comment to your piece about the editing of the ordinance. I appreciate that, but I don't know that that's always it. I mean, that would be a great practice going forward. I don't know that that's always been our practice. I feel like when one council member brings something forward, then, they bring it forward and they do have kind of some liberties to make, or they have had in the past, some liberties to make some edits. So if we're going to have that new practice, that's fine, but I don't recall that being the practice the last 4 years all the time. And then also to that point, what was my last point? To Alderman Nguyen. So we did, Councilmember Nguyen, we did spend a whole lot of time talking about community engagement with the leaf blowers and all that stuff. I also, during that time, received 4 emails that told me, at least it said, there has been engagement. The business owners knew, they just don't want to pay the cost. I don't know that that's correct, but that is this person's opinion. But what I will say to that is I understand this is kind of a bigger thing, but we also do vote on stuff on this body that we have not done community engagement for. So again, I just want to kind of put that out there that I understand your point about reaching out to Target and all those places, but my assumption would be by doing that, they all are going to tell us how great they are and that they don't need to pay this, they can't afford to pay it. So, I don't know that going out to them should necessarily change what we do, right? I think I have sat here long enough to hear people say, if you do this, if you do that, it's going to bankrupt me, I'm going to move, so on and so forth. So I just think that we should be mindful in kind of the conversation being, we have to go to the businesses and see what their thoughts are. I think that's good practice. I do agree. But I think we have the ability to make decisions based on what we think is best, not based on what we, think our businesses think is best.
Councilmember Nusma.
Wait, I'd like to have a correction there. I mean, Councilmember Fleming, I did not say that I would act in the way that the businesses thought was best. I never said that. I said that we have processes and procedures here where we respect community members and we bring them in to hear their views. That doesn't mean that I'm going to align with the whatever business.
Correct. You're correct. So I miscategorized that. You're correct. No. I'm saying you're correct. But we don't always, for every decision, bring in community, and that's why sometimes they are screaming at us because they feel like we have not brought them.
Right. But these are major employers here in the city, and if the rest of the council wants to show the business community that we make impulsive decisions and don't discuss it, that's fine. But I think that's really foolish.
Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did do some Googling on my own and had an intern do some Googling as well. I came up with a list of 19 potential stores that may be affected, and Some of them may, in fact, be excluded because of measures they have taken on their own, but that's based on an intern doing some Googling. And as much as I support the concept of supporting essential workers and putting those folks who have risked the most on the front lines and doing right by them, in an environment where the CEO of Target, also according to Google, netted almost $20 million in 2020. I like the idea, I like the direction, but for something like this requires more than just 10 minutes on Google from one alderman and some Googling by an intern. I don't think that's sufficient due diligence that would allow me to support this ordinance at this time.
Thank you. So no one who has not yet spoken is seeking recognition. So Councilmember Reed.
Yeah. I appreciate the feedback from my colleagues. We heard from Nature's perspective earlier. I don't know if we're working on the leaf blower ordinance for a while. I don't know if folks sat down with Nature's perspective as the leaf blower ordinance was being crafted. So I would hope that, as folks are chiding me, that we hold ourselves to that same standard and ensure that we're doing the same thing. I think it's important that if folks needed clarification on certain issues, we have a wonderful city staff request of city staff could and should be made. We are council members who are compensated $16,000 a year or less. And so we rely on our city staff to get data and information for us. That's how the process works with every other ordinance. So I would request that members make those through this legislative process request of city staff. We've had, this is a condensed process. The new council has been here for just over a month and 4 days. The folks who were on the council previously were aware of this issue for the last year, and we didn't take action. We know that while we are stepping out of the worst of the pandemic with vaccination levels, steadily increasing, we know that we're not out of the thick of it because we're just now receiving $20 million in ARPA funding. Next year, we'll be receiving another $20 million. So we know that people are still, in our communities, are still hurting. We know, again, that the moratorium on evictions has not yet been lifted. We know that, utility shutoffs are going to be happening. And so while, yes, we can go into a restaurant or walk into certain places without a mask, although I think we should still be wearing masks even if we're vaccinated, we know that, again, the economic hardship is not over, right? If it is, then we should return the $40 million in ARPA funds because we're out of the pandemic. Everything is fine now. But I don't think that's the wish of this body. And so what I would like to do is continue to work with Council Cummings to make sure that council is provided with an appropriate with the correct document. I do understand that technological failure, it happens, like that's life sometimes, and so I'm happy to. So I'm going to make a motion to suspend the rules to allow for us to hold this until the next meeting. And I would wish. I don't believe it needs unanimous support. I think that's only if we're doing for introduction and action. But if it does, then it does. But I would hope that we would vote unanimously to hold this item until the next meeting, so we can get all of the edits into the document, so it's presented to the public and to the council members, as Alderman Nguyen said, so you have all of the information beforehand. And if folks need additional information from staff, we can get that. So I make a motion to suspend the rules to allow for a hold.
So Councilmember Reed makes a motion to suspend the rules to allow for a hold. Councilmember Fleming seconds. Attorney Cummings, can you inform us about, does that require 6 votes or 9 votes?
2/3.
2/3.
So I apologize. I was mistaken earlier. It's 2/3.
Thank you. So the motion has been made to suspend the rules to enable a hold. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin? No. Councilmember Ravel?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming? Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
No.
Councilmember Nguyen?
With 5 votes in favor, the motion fails.
So that was the motion to suspend the rules to hold this. And so what council is really saying by voting no to hold this to get further information, what you're saying to our workers is that you don't give a damn about what they've gone through during this pandemic, that you don't even care about holding this to get the information that you're looking for, so we can have that debate that you say, and especially for the council members who sat here for the last year during the pandemic and did nothing. You should be ashamed. So we can call the question on this, and it will fall as it will.
Councilmember Burns.
I just want to say it's unfortunate we couldn't hold it because, I am uncomfortable moving forward on it with the amendments not being added to the document. I mean, there was a really important amendment that said that this would go to
the
emergency declaration and not until, school reopens or there was another
Phase 5.
Yeah, phase 5 or school reopens or whatever came first. That was pretty key, pretty important. We have heard from the business community, but I haven't heard anybody say they can't afford it. I haven't heard anybody say they operate at a net loss. I haven't heard anybody say threaten to close their business or move away from Evanston. I talked to Vanessa Rosales, who I think is connected to Food for Less, and I reached out to her as she asked us to and said, look, how did these sites perform here in Evanston, and didn't hear back from them at all. I do know in California, a lot of the sites that they ended up closing were underperforming, right? So I wanted to hear from the business community about those concerns, and we didn't hear them. But it's unfortunate because I those amendments were really key. They were important. They would have. I've heard even today council members say things that just aren't true, that aren't even in the ordinance. And so if we're going to also require there be public engagement, I think please council members read the actual ordinance so that you're up to date on what it says and you're not repeating things that are false and that aren't in the proposed ordinance. But I just wanted to put that on the record so folks know why I can't vote yes on this now.
Thank you. The final speaker is Councilmember Kelly.
I'm concerned that the public has not been properly noticed about this ordinance that we're voting on. I'm concerned that we will be potentially violating, right, because we don't have, there was an issue with the amendments being included. Is this accurate?
As I understand it, the amendments are not going to be, have not been proposed or voted on.
It's ready to vote. Yeah.
Right, but they failed to make it into the packet. Is that right?
Yes, there were amendments that failed to make it into the packet. Sorry.
Right,
Chair.
so you would be voting on what's in the packet.
And
okay. So I'm concerned about this. It seems to me that this is not what was supposed to be in the packet. It just doesn't, I mean, I realize we just, voted 5-4 about suspending the rules, but it seems to me that there was an intended ordinance put forth that didn't make it into the packet. So we're voting on something that wasn't really put forward. I just think we're doing something that's not quite right here by the public with regard to OMA.
We can only vote for what's been produced.
I'm sorry?
no, well, that, if I can chime in, with Open Meetings Act, we can certainly amend an item on the floor and make changes to an item on the floor. So it wouldn't be an Open Meetings Act violation, but I do think it would have been beneficial for us to have the time to allow both the community and council members to read, the proposal as amended. And I don't, fault, Council Cummings for this. I get it. And so I just wish that the council would have been willing to hold so we can get those edits in. I'll let you continue your time, Councilmember Kelly. Unless you were done speaking.
Okay, so just to be clear, what the motion before the council is the motion on the item in the packet without amendment. And seeing no one else seeking recognition, would the clerk?
Mayor Biss, just one point of information to Councilmember Kelly's point. There was an amendment that did make it to the packet. It was introduced as an hourly rate bonus and has been amended to be a flat rate bonus after a discussion introduction. So that amendment is in the packet and has been published for the community.
Yes.
But the other amendments that Councilmember Burns and Councilmember Reed and I discussed and that did not get saved and I forgot did not get into the packet.
Councilmember Reed?
And I would just like to note that the change from the hourly rate to the monthly rate was a concession to align with what the business community had already been doing, which is monthly payouts. And also, when you look at the numbers, it's also a concession because it's a lot lower than what was originally proposed. The average worker at one of these grocery stores works about 30 hours per week. And this would equate to just about $2 per hour of a bonus. And this would only apply, and the other intention was for this to apply to workers who worked during the pandemic, would not apply to workers going forward, and it would last through the emergency declaration was the other amendment. I'm going to go ahead and do it and make those amendments because I think we should vote on this. And if you want to vote no to it, you can, let me know that you don't care about essential workers without directly saying it by voting no.
Before you make any amendments, I did want to point out to you, Councilmember Reed, that the qualification of the workers eligible also made it into the packet. That amendment.
Yes, it did. Yes.
So can you please state clearly the amendment that you are?
Yes, I'll make one amendment, which is to, and it's currently tied to Phase 5 or school reopening. I would like to tie it to the state's emergency declaration. So I move that amendment to the ordinance, which means that this would expire. I'm sorry.
I just said that's unclear.
The requirement. Thank you for that. The requirement would expire when the emergency declaration expires, and so that's the one change that I'd like to make.
Is there a second to that amendment? Just that motion, I should say. So the motion fails for lack of a second. Would the clerk please call the roll on the initial motion then? And so just to be clear, we're voting on, again, what is in the pack.
I would like to make a motion to refer this to what committee? I don't know.
I think the question has been called.
All right.
Can we move forward with the vote, just in the interest of time? Thank you.
Councilmember Newsma?
No.
Councilmember Burns?
No.
Councilmember Sufferton? Councilmember Ravel?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
No.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
No.
Councilmember Nguyen?
With 2 voting in the affirmative, 7 voting in the negative, SP2 does not pass. This brings us to the consent agenda. Before I give members the opportunity to pull things off the consent agenda, I have a few items for housekeeping. Number 1, we're going to pull P3 off because it did not achieve a majority vote in planning and development. Number 2, we're going to pull P6 off because we've already addressed it. And number 3, Councilmember Fleming requests that we suspend the rules so that items R1 and R2 be for both introduction and action, and I presume that would require a separate vote to suspend the rules. Is there a motion to suspend the rules to allow items R1 and R2 to be for both introduction and action?
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Nguyen makes that motion. Councilmember Newsma seconds. Would you call the roll, please, clerk?
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
So there are 9 voting in the affirmative, which allows us to suspend the rules. So now R1 and R2 are on the consent agenda for introduction and action. So are there other items that members would like to see removed from the consent agenda?
I would like to pull the bills list off.
And sir, what number is that?
That is item
A1.
Yes.
A1.
A1. Thank you.
And I would like to pull A10 and A12, please.
A10 and A12.
And P5.
P5.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was A10 and A13. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Okay. So far I have A1, 10, and 13, as well as P5. Anything else? Going once, going twice? Correct. All right, so do I hear a motion to adopt the entire consent agenda, including R1 and R2, which are for both introduction and action, with the exception of A1, A10, A13, P3, P5, and P6?
I move adoption of the consent agenda.
P5, wasn't it? Not P6?
So 3 and 6 were off already, and then P5 was pulled off by Councilmember Ravel.
Okay.
A second.
So Councilmember Reed makes that motion. Councilmember Fleming seconds. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming. Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
So with 9 voting in the affirmative, the consent agenda passes. And so now for the items we pulled off, let's begin, if we would, with P5.
You mean item A1?
Oh, so, all right, we'll do it in order. Let's begin with item A1. Does someone have a
So, Mr.
motion?
Mayor, I'd like to move the approval of the City of Evanston payroll bills list.
Is there a
in the
second?
dollar amount?
Sorry.
Well,
in the dollar amount of $2,787,552.60, and that's as of May 23rd, and then of June 15th, the dollar amount of $6,906,210.68. That is for action.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed.
Yes, I would like to make an amendment to the bills list to increase the bills list by $3,185 to cover an invoice from the clerk's office from a while ago for an intern who worked last year. And so I'd like to ensure that this young Evanstonian who is in college and who has done a tremendous amount of work for the city and done, doesn't matter what he's done, we need to pay someone who did work for the city, and I want to make sure that we get this person paid some.
So, Alderman or Councilman Reed and also members of the council, did this appear anywhere on the bills list?
Councilmember, let's hear if there's a second, and then we'll have discussion.
Well, no, I mean, we're voting on something that's not
A
on the
second.
bills list, and we actually discussed this in committee. So if I missed it as the chairperson, I'm just want to know, was this on the bills list for a vote? Was this on a bills list for a vote? That's a question.
Sir, I was about to answer the question. Please
Thank you.
Be respectful. No, this was not on the bills list, which is why I'm making an amendment to increase the bills list by the dollar amount that I listed. It's been on the bills list in the past. We can make an amendment to the bills list. I received a reminder recently, and so that's why I'm bringing this up, and to ensure that we do right by our citizens, particularly folks who are highly involved in our local government.
Councilman Reed, members of City Council, I will, I guess, use the word transparency. We're being asked to vote on an item that did not appear on the bills list. And so as chairperson, you sit on the committee, and we didn't bring it up in committee, and at 20 minutes to 10 and we still have a full agenda. I'm just going to respectfully ask that we continue to vote on this. If you would like to bring this item up, I would suggest you do it at a next meeting, but this item has been before the city council. It has been denied. And as chair, I'm not going to entertain this because it isn't on a piece of paper or appeared in a public packet. And so, in the interest of time, Mr. Mayor, can we please move forward with the vote?
That is not how the point of order.
I don't believe, and I'm happy to have the Corporation Council in, I don't believe I have the authority to reject a motion. That's an amendment in order. Folks can vote it down if they want to, but I don't think I'm allowed to just say he doesn't get to make a motion to amend an item that's before us. Is that correct, Mr. Cummings?
That's correct, and I believe Councilmember Kelly did second.
She did.
In the middle of the discussion. So.
What are you voting on? As a point of information.
The whether to amend the bills list by $3,185. Is that the correct number?
Yes.
And what are we tying it to vote on?
Can you turn your microphone on, Councilmember Braithwaite?
It's on. It's like, what are we voting on to tie 3,000 to?
The motion is to fulfill an invoice that has been before this body previously. I've shared this invoice with folks who have not previously received it, and I think we should do right by a young man who has done tremendous work for the city. And I apologize, I forgot to bring it up during whatever committee this was, AP&W. Slipped my mind then. And certainly if we're going to set the standard that we can't make amendments to things on the floor because it wasn't in the agenda, then again, let's not use that selectively. Let's never amend anything and change anything. If it doesn't appear in the agenda, then I mean, to me, that's a ridiculous argument. So we can call the question if there's no further discussion.
There's both two members are seeking recognition, but the Corporation Council also wants to weigh in again, I believe.
I just wanted to point out two things to the council. The corporate authority has already voted on this particular item.
That is correct.
And secondly, even if it was brought up again, which is possible, without the actual invoice, with the amendment, we risk violating the Open Meetings Act.
Councilmember Kelly and then Wynn.
Right, so I certainly, I don't think anyone here wants to deny someone pay that's work, so I want to hear more about it. And obviously, is there a way that we can this be held in any way so that we can see the documentation? I mean, I don't think anybody, I certainly don't want to deny someone pay that worked for our city. So how can we move forward with this and also provide documentation?
So as a point of clarification, this item was voted on a year ago. So you run the risk of anything that a previous council, even if we did this last meeting, had voted on, discussed in length. And now you bring it before us at the 10 o'clock hour without the courtesy of any information in front of us. I would think Corporation Council, the proper procedure would be someone on the opposing side would have to bring this back if there was even such a opportunity to do that. I would just say as a point of privilege now, can we please move forward with the rest of the council agenda, Mr. Mayor?
I can't do that. I can have us vote on this. Councilmember Wynn.
Well, I think several things. One, this item was addressed at length by the prior council. So I would like to know, we should not vote one way or another on this item tonight. We need to hear from the Corporation Council about the impact of the fact that we voted no on this during the last council. So I would say that we should not vote on this tonight, no matter what, and that we should proceed with the bills list. I don't think that bringing a $3,000 item to the bills list without any documentation is wise. And I don't want to deny anyone the ability to amend the bills list, but I would like to be informed beforehand. So I don't think that this council should move forward on this at all until we hear the full impact of this from the Corporation Council. So I would suggest to Councilmember Reed that he holds this and re-present it at the next City Council meeting.
So no one who hasn't spoken is seeking recognition, so back to Councilmember Reed.
I will, I am happy to hold this if I have a commitment from my colleagues that they'll take a good faith effort at this, because I did not see a good faith effort a year ago when this was voted on. And I think it's inappropriate that we've held this for so long and denied, again, a young man who the League of Women Voters of Evanston has recognized for his civic engagement, that we denied this person who did tremendous work for the city during the at the beginning of the pandemic last year, ensuring that folks were able to get to their polling place on March 17th. And we sent out a blast to folks, giving them instructions. This was at the very beginning of the pandemic. So
Point
I
of
think,
order, Mr. Mayor. We don't need a further discussion about this. I think we should either decide to hold it or not hold it, because we did have a thorough discussion. I did act in good faith, Councilmember
Point of
Reed.
order.
You may have
in
a
the
different
middle of-
perception, but I acted in good faith, and
Mayor,
I will
I was
not
in
be
the middle of
accused of
my
not
time.
acting in good faith.
I'm going to ask everyone to pause for a second. This has become a heated discussion. I agree with Councilmember Nguyen that negotiation about whether a past act was in good faith is not a constructive way to determine whether you're going to withdraw the amendment. I would ask you to decide whether you'd like to move forward with the vote on this amendment or withdraw it for discussion in a subsequent meeting. And I would say that I have, based on interactions with all 9 of you, consistently experienced everyone acting in good faith, and I would trust that if this is brought back and there's time given to examine the ramifications, that everybody, regardless of how they come down, will come to a good faith judgment about whether to support it or not. Go ahead, Councilmember Reed.
As I was saying, I'm withdrawing the motion and asking that it be placed on the next bills list.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to, again, just restate the motion that's on the floor. It's item A1, approval of the City Council payroll and bills list, May 23rd, 21, in the dollar amount of $2,787,552.60, and the June 15th, 2021, in the amount of $6,906,210.68. That is for action.
So that motion is still on the floor. It's been seconded. Our next action will be a vote, but I just want to get clarity from the Corporation Council about Councilmember Reed's request. Will that how that will be addressed?
So essentially, the invoice needs to be resubmitted in order for it to make it onto the bills list. However, as I mentioned previously, the corporate authority has already voted on that invoice and disproved that invoice. And this is essentially a motion to reconsider, which would be out of order. But in order for it to be back on the bills list, it needs to be submitted to make it to the bills list.
Does that submission require a vote of the council?
I don't know that the submission requires a vote of the council. It would simply be a contractor submitting for payment, and it'd be up for the council to approve that payment or not.
Councilmember Reed.
I would like us to look into that. I mean, if that is the case, that we can't vote on things, that we can't bring things up again, then I would assume that the leaf blower ordinance is dead, because we voted on it and we can't reconsider that.
Mayor, just a point of order. I feel like we're way off subject right now. I mean, we're talking about we're right in the middle of a bills list.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
And I'm going to ask that you get control of the meeting.
I actually think it's really critical that we walk away from the discussion with clarity about next steps. Just to be candid, this is a pretty hot discussion already. And I think that the follow-up will be worse if we don't come away seeing eye to eye about what the next steps are. So if Councilmember Reed is content to withdraw the amendment of the understanding that there will be an effort to get to the bottom of this, I think we can move forward. I think an implied commitment from staff to put this on the bills list, if we're not sure if that's legally in order, would be a mistake. And I don't want us to have a fight in 2 weeks about the fact that we misunderstood one another right now.
So just a point of clarification, the corporate authorities' actions are binding in terms of the rights of third parties. So for example, the council voted, it doesn't have to be these members, the city council of Evanston voted to deny this ordinance. So in terms of the rights of that particular party, he cannot get paid. So that's essentially what I try to bring that up, and I will say it explicitly now, is that the city has already denied the invoice. So barring some other legal precedent that I'm unaware of, he doesn't have like the rights that he's affected unless he wanted to sue us for that money. That he cannot resubmit that invoice. It's the council has already decided, the city has already decided as a corporate body that that invoice will not be paid.
Councilmember Reed.
To be clear, Council Cummings, when we say his rights, we're saying we're his right to not be paid, or when we talk about the binding nature of something, would it not be if the council voted to pay him that he would have a right and that another council couldn't come in and undo that? The idea that he has a right not to be paid for work that he did, and the idea that we would, because the previous council voted not to pay him and we're voting to give someone a payment for work that they did is somehow violating their rights, I think is misplaced.
So I would recommend that we break at this point. I think I am happy to commit to work with you, with the Corporation Council, with anyone else to get to the bottom of this between now and our next meeting. I think it sounds like from what we just heard, it would be reckless for us to commit to any item appearing on the next bills list without engaging that investigation. I think the commitment for me is probably the most honest commitment that you can get right now. If that's still enough to withdraw the motion, let's move forward. If it's not, let's vote on the motion. But I'm not sure how much more we're going to accomplish with this back and forth tonight.
Just make a last suggestion that if we look at this, that we don't use the prejudice of his whatever example, but if a council votes on something, anything, how do you bring that back, right? Because we voted on this and we voted it no. And we vote no on a lot of things. And so that we don't continue to recycle inefficiency, can you just educate us at our next meeting when we decide on something, if and what is that procedure, and put it in categories? That way we're not like discussing this individual in an open session, because I feel like now we're way off where we need to be in this agenda right now.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Mayor, I'd like to get back to the agenda.
I'd be happy to have conversations with individual council members offline.
I withdraw the motion.
Thank you. I look forward to discussing this offline. Would the clerk call the roll on the unamended item A1?
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin. Aye. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Item A1 passes, and that brings us now to item A10. Would anyone make a motion?
There was an amendment in A2 coming out of the committee, and that was brought up by Councilmember Kelly. And so the notes that was recommended from A2, based on the question that you asked Sarah Fax, was the additional CBD funding of 3 goals is a fine, and its corrected amount is $26,768. In the body of the memo, the amount allocated for the administrative should be $5,354 and not $4,015 mentioned in the memo. But again, the recommendation action is correct, so you can leave it on the consent agenda. And then item A11 was removed from consent agenda and asked to be held over until September 13/2021 in committee.
Got it. So just want to make sure I understand. So A2 is passed.
It passed in committee. It was just a clarification. And item A11, Mayor, was held to September, what was that date? September
Okay.
13th.
So in light of the fact that that was not pulled off the consent agenda before, Mr. Cummings, do we have to entertain a motion to reconsider?
Yes.
Would someone make a motion to reconsider passage of item A11?
No, it was held in committee. This is just a point of information. We went right through and voted, so.
Are you comfortable with that?
Councilmember Braithwaite, it was not pulled off the consent agenda, so it was, as far as the council is concerned, it was on the agenda.
That's what
and
I
it was
thought.
passed on the consent agenda
Got
for
it.
introduction, even though it was held in committee. So you
So-
need a motion to reconsider.
So would someone make a motion to reconsider item A11?
I make a motion to reconsider item A11.
Second.
Councilmember Reed makes the motion to reconsider. Councilmember Ravel seconds. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn?
Aye.
On a 9-0 vote, the motion passes, and therefore A11 is no longer passed. Now, item A10 was pulled off the consent agenda. Would anyone make a motion regarding A10?
I'd like to move item A10, ordinance 52-0-21, amending the Title 8, Chapter 4 of the City Code concerning municipal solid waste.
Is there a second?
This is for introduction, by the way.
Second.
I can second. I pulled it off. I had a question. I'm sorry not to find it in the packet. So it had to do.
Councilmember Fleming?
I'm sorry. I'm just talking. So it had to do with two things. I think it was number 4 in there. I'm going to try to open the page here, where it talked about citizens being responsible for plowing out the alleyway, I believe, so that so I didn't watch committee, so maybe you guys changed that, but I wouldn't support that because, as we know, we already don't plow the alleys. And so now having a citizen go back there to try to do some kind of plowing so that the truck can make it. I mean, I realize the purpose of it, but it seems like a big task to be asking our residents now to be plowing out the alley, particularly on those big snow days. And then I think there was a point, is this the same one that also had a point about a cost for a second trash can? So, Director Stonebeck, if you want to speak to the alley piece, in case I misspoke on that, and then I will talk about the second piece as soon as I find it.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Dave Stonebeck, Public Works Director. The current code requires that the trash receptacle be cleared of snow so they can be picked up. Unfortunately, when some people clear the snow from around their dumpster, they place the snow between the dumpster and the alley. So even though the truck can get down the alley to pick up the dumpster, the mound of snow created by clearing around the dumpster prevents the dumpster from being picked up. So we're not asking them to plow the alley. We're just asking them to clear the snow around the dumpster and out towards the alley so that the dumpster can actually be picked up.
Okay, and so where are you proposing that they put the snow that they're clearing?
On either side of the dumpsters, not or behind the dumpsters, between their building and the dumpsters, but not in front of the dumpsters towards the alley. So again, this is so that we can provide the service of picking up the refuse that they're putting in the dumpsters, but then making it impractical for anybody to collect.
Okay, and then the other part was number 6 in the memo here, a cost of $75 to purchase a second refuge cart. What is the current cost?
It's always been $75. It just has not been in the code.
Oh.
So you get your first refuge cart for free. If you want a second refuge cart, we charge $75.
All right, so that's $75 for the cart, and then you're still paying, obviously, for the pickup of the trash through your water bill.
That is correct.
Okay, and so when someone moves to another house, how do we handle, so they bought this second cart, are they moving the cart with them? How are we handling that? Because now I've paid for a cart, Or do I return the card to get my $75 back? What happens if I don't need the second card?
You would take the second cart with you. We don't buy the cart back. I'm not sure that I have ever come across that issue.
Okay, so I have not moved in Evanston. So literally, I'm moving my cart. So now I have 3 carts in my home. If I move to another home, I am literally moving my carts there with me.
You're moving your additional cart. You wouldn't move the first cart would stay with the property. And if you bought a second cart, then yes, you would probably want to move it with you.
And that's the same thing for the yard waste, because the yard waste is an optional card. So I would also
correct.
move my yard waste card. Okay, I guess I was not aware of that policy. All right, so so my issue with this is really number 4. I understand, but given that it's already hard for residents to plow. I know for myself, even plowing my cart when it's in the street, and then I have the snowplow comes behind me, and I've done my best to shovel out my cart, and then the snowplow comes and it pulls me back in. So I don't know how we would even enforce this if people are trying to clear the snow from around their containers in the alley, and then you all come and you see the snow's piled up at the front. It just seems like something that's not even enforceable to me. So, and again, for the same reason that we have the same problem on the streets with the snow plows, and I imagine in the alleys when people are trying to plow out their carts and then a car or something comes and plows them back in, I guess it seems like a good faith effort, but I don't even know that we would be able to enforce this. So I would vote no.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
No.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
On this matter, there are 8 voting in the affirmative, so A10 is passed. That brings us to A13. Would you like to make a motion on A13?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move item A13, Ordinance 68-0-21, amending the City Code Section 1-17-4-2, sale of real property. This is for introduction. Staff recommends that City Council adoption of this ordinance, amending the City Code 1-17-4-2.
Is there a second? Councilmember Braithwaite moves item A13. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Councilmember Fleming.
Yeah, real quick. I'm not supporting this. I want to understand the staff's perspective in terms of redundancy, given that we don't really even have newspapers anymore. I'm not sure how much work it is to advertise things, at least in our local newspaper. But I think if we're going to sell city property, then each step needs to be noticed for people, even if no one is paying attention, for the sake of us being transparent with that action. And then just if I can quickly address Mr. Vasilko's comment about A14. A14 does not give city staff blanket authority to sell property. So just want to make sure we put that out there. We had a long discussion about automobiles and how they're sold, so those will be noticed publicly. But I do not support A13 for the reasons I stated. Thank you.
Were you soliciting information from staff or no?
No, not really. I'm sorry I said that, but that's not what I meant.
Director, would you like to hit the high points that we discussed in the committee, just for the benefit of our council, please?
Point of order.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I believe, did we not, I believe we had a discussion recently about creating a dedicated webpage to post notices. I think it was obviously for, I believe, another matter, but could we, to Alderman Fleming's point, while it may not make sense to post in newspapers, can we do this? What is the process for public posting, and how can we do a better job of getting this out to residents so they're aware of? Director Stonebeck or whoever wants to.
Good evening again. I am not familiar myself with what you were talking about, putting notices on the webpage, so I'm not sure that I would be appropriate to advise you on that. I know that putting it in the paper is the past policy, and I agree with you that perhaps papers aren't being read as frequently as they once were. So I'm not sure what the council would like staff to do.
We could potentially send this back to committee for further discussion if council members want to look at additional options for noticing for the public. This, as Director Stonebeck brought up earlier this evening in committee, this was brought forward because we have a number of instances where the city owns alleys that are not improved. Right. So they are not paved, they are not gravel, they are just alleys running through private property that are being utilized by homeowners. So staff's effort to bring this forward was intentional to make it easier for those homeowners to purchase that property from the city and add it to their own backyards. But if it's causing unintentional angst, let's have more conversation about it. There's no sense of urgency to it. If you would like to send it back to committee, we can do that.
Corporation Counsel wanted to speak, and then we'll have Council Members Braithwaite and then Kelly.
So just 2 quick points. I believe state law requires us to provide certain level of notification as a baseline, and so we can't go anywhere anything beneath that. The confusion is in our city code as to when we provide that notice, which is what this ordinance is meant to address. Right. So it's meant to provide notice that we're required to by state law after the city council has determined it's appropriate to sell the property. Right now, and to be quite fair, my staff, when we look at this ordinance, we don't know if we have to do it before it even comes to council to make a decision if you want to sell the property, or if it is after the council's decided to sell the property. So that's the purpose of this amendment, at least from the law department's perspective.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
I think, Nick, our corporation counsel said it exactly, and just for members of the public at this late night, clearly there's nothing that is going to be sold behind anyone's back with all of us sitting here. This was specifically using the example of an alley. I think Alderman Suffredin, you have a similar situation in the 6th Ward. These things take a very long time to work out, and we just want to make sure that there's a very clear description that goes out to neighbors before anyone is notified. So if it's something that we want to continue to beat to death, I would be more than happy to hold it in committee and invite everyone to be a part of the discussion, or if you feel comfortable voting on it just based on the explanation tonight by Director Stonebeck and our corporation counsel, I would like to move forward with it.
Councilmember Kelly and then Nusma.
Right. I would also not support this. I think we should be looking for providing more information, and prior to voting as representatives, we should want our public to be noticed, and we should figure out the best way. We should be modifying that form of notification so that we can in fact be informed by residents, by constituents, not informing them after we make a decision. So I would oppose this. And also the ramifications are more than alleys. That would extend to buildings like our civic center. So I think it's very important that we figure out how to put out a notification as broadly and well before we vote, so that we can hear from our constituents and residents. Thank you.
And just a point of clarification, the notification is not going out after we vote. I want to be clear with that. That is incorrect information.
Okay, then maybe I misunderstood, but my understanding is that the amendment proposed the notice would go in the paper in circulation after the city council has determined to sell property.
After they've determined, that means announcing that there is a sale, not that we've made a sale.
So even before that, even whether city property should be sold, that decision is made by the council, and then
the notice goes out.
Then the notice would go out. We haven't negotiated a price. Nothing's happened. Just a matter of the city council has determined that this property will be sold.
That is correct. That is what the vote is.
But that is after a vote.
So you'll be next, but Councilmember Nusma is next.
Oh, sorry.
As I understand it, the current ordinance requires public notice that the council is going to consider selling property. If the council then decides to go ahead with the sale, there would be an additional public notice. What we're voting on tonight is eliminating that first public notice, which doesn't really serve much purpose. Until the council decides to vote to sell something, then run the public notice, then the council votes again to sell it. It makes sense to me. I'm prepared to vote for it.
Glad you're listening. Thank you, sir.
I just wanted to clarify, Councilmember Nusma, the code, at least as the law department interprets it, only requires a single notice. So even if it was noticed before the council made a decision to sell, there would not be a second notice after the council made that decision.
But it
So
would appear on an
the point of the ordinance is to clarify that there be public notice, but when it should go out, because right now it's not clear.
So no one who has not yet spoken is seeking recognition. So the next speakers will be council members Fleming and then Reed.
So I could just vote no as it is. I mean, I think it's obviously just amongst us confusing enough that it probably needs a little more work. City Manager Storley has said it's not, vital. If we want to make it for parcels under a certain size or under a certain value, that's one thing. I mean, I think alleys are very different than buildings. I think we've had a lot of conversation and a lot of angst in this community about selling stuff. And so anything that leads to anybody feeling like we are potentially going to sell things without a notice, just in my opinion, doesn't make sense to move forward with it. The law department needs clarification, and we can kind of limit it to smaller things, that's fine. But if we want to, as you keep saying, Councilmember Braithwaite, for the sake of time, move forward, I'm happy to just vote no on it and leave it as that. I also don't think that your comments need to be that we all need to come to, committee to hash it out. I think we're all on different committees, and I think when we're not on the committee, then we hash it out at council as we're doing now. So I am not on DPW. I have the right to talk about it now and get clarification now. I'm still not clear. I'm happy to vote no. I'm happy to, have the staff take it back and kind of make it clearer for everybody. But I will follow the lead of the majority.
Councilmember Reed and then Kelly.
Yeah, I will just note that it is important. I mean, once the council has made a decision to vote to sell the property, it's important that the public is able to be aware of this and weigh in before that vote is taken. And I think that's why having that notice up front is important. And also, I agree. I think this should go, for transparency's sake, as was mentioned earlier, I think this should go back to committee to make sure that, it seems the chair of the committee wasn't, fully clear on what's going on. So it's likely that the rest of the council isn't 100% clear on what's going on. And so I know that one other person has turned on their light for recognition. So, but I will make, after that, a motion to send this back to committee.
So Councilmember Kelly is the last speaker.
I was just going to say the same thing, that I think this needs to go back and to City Manager Storley's thoughts and recommendations that this be worked on a little bit more.
So Councilmember Reed?
Yes. So I move that we send A13 back to committee.
Is there a second? Councilmember Reed moves that A13 go back to APW. Councilmember Fleming seconds. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming? Aye. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite? Councilmember Nguyen?
On a vote of 9-0, item A13 will go back to the Administration and Public Works Committee, and this brings us now to item P5. Would someone make a motion regarding item P5, please?
I move item
Yes,
P.
Mr. Mayor. I will move ordinance 53021, amending portions of the city code. P5?
Councilmember Nguyen moves item P5, ordinance 53-0-21. Is there a second? Councilmember Ravel seconds, and we discussed this last meeting. We had a presentation from proponents, and so this meeting, those who are in opposition to this will have the opportunity to give a presentation of the same length, which is 7 minutes.
Thank you all very much. I know the hour is late. Mayor Biss very kindly said that we would have 7 minutes. At this point in time, I'm feeling very guilty about even imposing on you that long, and I'm sorry. The slides that I show you, you may not have time to read them all. They are all recorded. The city clerk has them all. So I'll be speaking. Don't feel too anxious about what's going by on the screen. I just wanted to give you some data while I talk. I wanted to start by talking about what's actually in the ordinance. So both before and after the 2019 amendment, the U2 zoning ordinance allowed Northwestern to use its athletic complex for college athletics and also for other university-sponsored activities like speakers and musical performances. And the 2019 amendment didn't change any of that. So what did it change? It changed the kind of temporary special events that could be held at the athletic complex. Before 2019, the ordinance deliberately limited those events to nonprofit events and amateur athletics. And the 2019 amendment removed the words nonprofit and amateur. So now NU can essentially lease out its facilities to Jam Productions or something else for commercial entertainment and pro sports events. In the face of a huge amount of community opposition, they included a sunset provision that provided that this ordinance would expire at the end of this year. And this ordinance that is before you tonight is an amendment that would just change that sunset date. So why should we not do that? The next couple of slides are really just examples of some of the risks that are posed of litigation and conflict over this. NU has a documented history of using limited activities that it's been given permission to do, and then taking that as precedent to ask for the right to do many more activities, and essentially just getting that camel's nose under the tent. And I'm not trying to paint a bad picture about Northwestern. It is the behavior of a rational economic actor to always try to get the best deal that they can. But when I listen to you guys, I hear you talking about worries about litigation. And this creation of the stadium and the athletic complex right in the middle of residential neighborhood sparks a lot of both of those things, especially litigation. And this ordinance will do that too, in a couple different ways. First of all, it gives NU special treatment. Other nonprofits in Evanston don't get the right to hold concerts and big events if they want to. That's inequitable, and that gives them the right to actually sue the city for why are you giving NU special treatment. There are also no standards in the ordinance about the kinds of events that can be held. And so if NU can say, oh, the city is abusing its discretion, they shouldn't have turned down a certain event that we wanted to hold, they have a right in the ordinance to try to bring that kind of suit because there's nothing spelled out in that ordinance. So this is our bottom line on that. It also Northwestern, as I say, is an economic rational actor. They will take whatever actions are in their economic self-interest, even if that leads to them to ignore limits, which they actually often do even now, or results in lawsuits. So let's talk about the economics. I heard from council that that's a big point for you guys. So there's a rosy picture from this. Mr. Davis told you that NU expects direct revenue to the city to be about $217,000 over 2 years, or a little over $100,000 per year, which is not a lot. They also say that people coming to Evanston would spend an additional $1.2 million, based on a Chamber of Commerce study that says every person who comes to downtown spends an extra $30 beyond, the cost of the event they come to see. And that's in things like restaurants and food and drink and paid parking, lodging if they happen to do lodging. And the city, of course, doesn't itself receive that $1.2 million. It receives any taxes that are paid on that spending, but it doesn't actually get that. But the businesses would, theoretically, right, if that number were right. The trouble is that that money is not really right, and there are a couple of reasons why. One is that although a lot of us have a very positive picture of big concerts and pro sports events, and we tend to think that surely they would help a local economy. But a majority of economists actually believe that proximity to pro sports and mega events is actually a net drain on a local economy. And economists, who are the folks who put those slides together, by the way, these are professionals who I'm delivering their PowerPoint at the moment, they listed out a couple of different kinds of reasons why the benefits are small. The businesses that could benefit actually usually are benefiting from crowded people, from people who come to see them anyway, from local Evanstonians. There's also the issue of the traffic and the congestion that events cause. What that actually does is really harm all of the non-food businesses that are in the area, because folks don't want to come when they have to compete with everyone else trying to get into the same area. Thank you. So there's a limit on what can actually happen there. But the main point is, where does this spending happen that the businesses would actually get? Northwestern is in the process of creating a self-sufficient entertainment district up in U2 right now. They've hired Levy to provide catering. They have gotten the right to sell liquor as well as non-alcoholic beverages, and they have free parking. So why would anyone go anywhere else? That $1.2 million is going to go into their pockets. And I have to say, the businesses downtown are hoping for the crumbs, but I think Northwestern is going to be eating the lunch. So they are the ones who are getting the benefit. I actually think that if I were a local business owner, I would wonder why the Chamber of Commerce has been saying, yes, give NU the right to compete with me. Because this amendment lets NU compete with local businesses like Space, as well as bars and restaurants. Thank you. The 2019 amendment gave NU a gift, and it harms both businesses and residents. And I ask you to vote against this automatic one-year extension. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to speak on this item? Councilmember Revelle.
Of course. So previously, I guess at our last meeting, I talked about how allowing professional sports and for-profit events would undermine the protections that our zoning code is supposed to provide to area residents. I talked about how approving this amendment would set an unwise precedent, and the proposal does not meet the standards for amendments in our zoning code. What I wanted to just talk about briefly tonight is a lot of times people say to the Ryan Field neighbors, well, you knew you were moving in next door to a stadium. What did you expect? But the uses of the U2 campus have increased significantly over the years. The complex of buildings that you see there on the U2 campus weren't always there. And to name just a few of the more recent buildings, I am going back to McGaw Hall, for example, was built in 1953. The Welsh Ryan Arena originally built in 1983. Northwestern added baseball grandstand and permanent bleachers, and then scoreboard, et cetera. The Treenan's multi-purpose facility was built in 1996, and then we just had the major renovation of the Welsh Ryan Arena in 2017. So the neighbors have really had a front row seat for the construction of these additional facilities, for more and more sports teams to be located on the campus, each with its own schedule of practices and games, and each with its own set of fans. So the additional commercial events at the Welsh Ryan Arena would be comparable to the attendance at a Big Ten men's basketball game. So currently, when there is a men's basketball game, residents come home from work and they can't find a place to park near their homes. And even if parking in Ryan Field is offered for free, many people's first choice is to park in the neighborhood because it allows you to leave more quickly after the game than if you're in the parking lot. So there are currently 18 men's basketball games a year with the attendance of, certainly not all of them have this large attendance, but the attendance can go up to the 7,000 capacity of the arena. And this amendment would add the potential of another 13 days of events in the year with the potential of a similar audience. Also, when there are special events currently, the setup and takedown are typically accompanied by trucks and trailers and work crews and beeping backup alarms. And depending on the event, this can start early in the morning and go late in the evening. So the neighbors, they bought their homes knowing that there would be a limited number of football games and other collegiate sports and educational events. And they counted on the zoning code to protect them. And I believe that we should not extend this pilot project and assure the neighbors that they can continue to count on the zoning code.
Thank you. Seeing that no one else is seeking recognition, would the clerk please call the roll? Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And someone may have to help me through this packet because in reading through it, I haven't found where it specifically says professional sports. And in reading this, and I want to be careful because I don't want to make a comparison to Evanston Township and Northwestern University. But when I read through this, and I'm on page 305, I want to remind everyone this is a pilot program. And Fieldhouse Indoor Recreational Facility, it says college and university. Outdoor recreational, it says college and university. Stadium, intramural, intercollegiate sports, events, practice, local, regional, state, elementary, high school events and practice thereafter, band and practice thereafter. And so when I make a comparison between Northwestern, I think about the wonderful things that we do on the west side of Evanston at Evanston Township. I think about FAN and the wonderful speakers that have come to Evanston Township High School. I think about the fact that Evanston Township hosts regional track meets, swim meets, basketball games. And here on the west side, guess what? Some people come and they have to maybe park someplace else. But when I think about the community benefit of that, I have to be honest, over the years, Burns, I think you grew up inside, Fleming, there are a number of us that have graduated from Evanston Township. Alderman Sufferton, I believe, graduated from Evanston Township. Nope, Loyola? You got me on that one. But you knew people that went to Evanston Township. The point I want to make is it's a university, and I think about, the number of speeches that I've heard at Evanston Township where we're packed in like sardines. And when people go home, they go home. And so here we have an opportunity for a university to have a pilot program. I don't work for the university. I would like to think that if this is a pilot program, it's a pilot program that has an opportunity to generate $1 million plus, whether it's in tax revenue or however you want to slice it. I'm willing to look at that pilot program and allow it to be a pilot program. And in the event that I can't think of what the horrific event would be, but it's exactly that. It's a pilot program. And so if we on the west side can host regional meetings, swim meetings, large speakers that overflow into the neighborhood, I don't know how to calculate that tax revenue. I'd much rather have this conversation now and be able to discuss it versus waiting until November and trying to figure out how we're going to save $1 million and then having us have to decide whether or not we're going to lay off staff and cut services. And I think that's what this vote is about. Whether we want to take a gamble on a pilot program, see if it works, see if it needs to be tweaked, continue to get feedback from our residents, just like we do on the west side of Evanston.
Thank you. Councilmember Reed, followed by Nusma.
Yeah, I will say, as Alderman Braithwaite says, without interrupting anyone, in the interest of time, I think I think we should call the question on this and move forward. I think it's clear that this does not have support of the council at this time, and I think we should continue forward.
So, Councilmember Reed calls the question. As I understand it, this is not a debatable motion, so we would simply vote.
Well, you vote to call the question when you say call the question, but.
All right. Thank you for clarifying, Councilmember. So we vote on the motion to call the question. Is that, did I have that right? Okay. Thanks. Would the clerk call the roll on the question of whether we're going to call the question?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton? Aye. Councilmember Ravel?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is the motion to call the question.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite? Aye. Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Great. On a vote of 8 to 1, we decided to call the question. So now let's. I don't know. Everyone's nodding. There was all this body language.
City Council Rule 18.9 requires a vote on a motion to call the question.
I don't doubt it. I'm just saying,
It would
I don't think
normally
we've
be a
ever done
voice-
it.
By
but
body language.
That's why I think Councilmember Nguyen was
18.9.
looking confused, because we don't usually
Yes,
vote
we
for call
have.
the question.
Anyway,
would
pursuant to
normally
Rule
be a voice
18.9,
vote.
we've successfully voted to call the question. The question will now be called. Would the clerk please call the roll on the underlying issue, which is to say P5?
Councilmember Nusma?
No.
Councilmember Burns?
No.
Councilmember Sufferton? Councilmember Ravel?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
No.
Councilmember Fleming? Councilmember Kelly?
No.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
No.
With one vote in the affirmative, P5 does not pass. That brings us to the end of our consent agenda and to call of the wards. Councilmember Nusma.
I'd just like to thank the residents of the 4th Ward who appeared at my office hours, an idea I stole from Council Member Nguyen. We're looking forward to our next ward meeting on Tuesday, July 6th, at which we will talk about the Complete Street Greenleaf project and devote some time to a little mini town hall on the ARPA budget. And also, just to give a heads up to the council, that Council Member Burns and I are going to be meeting with Environmental Justice Evanston later this week, and I hope to come to council fairly soon with some firm direction on environmental justice issues.
Thank you. Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, through an elective ETHS geometry program called Geometry in Construction, students and ETHS staff and Fifth Ward residents and a bunch of folks hung out today on 1824 Emerson Street is where the new home was placed. It's a three bedroom, 2.5 bath house that's real close to Dodge. And we had a good time just observing what it looked like to move something so massive down a main street. But more importantly, it's providing really critical affordable housing in Evanston. The way I understand it, SEPA, Community Partners for Affordable Housing, is going to continue to own the land, and then that will allow them to be able to sell the home at an affordable price. So it's a wonderful program. As I campaigned throughout the ward, there's 2 ways that I found people were able to buy affordable houses. It was working out an agreement with the previous owner and through land trust. So it's a wonderful program. Hats off to all the students who worked to build the home. So just wanted to send a shout out to them, and that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Well, I just want to make it clear, if I need to make a referral, that we are going to be coming back to the council with a great leaf blower ordinance the second Monday in September, because I think it was maybe not entirely clear in the vote that we took earlier. And secondly, I'm reminding all 7th Ward residents that I'm having a ward meeting on Thursday, July 24th. June 24th, excuse me.
Maybe July too. Thank you. Councilmember Reed.
Yes, I just want to, for residents and for folks, before every council meeting, I will hold a pre-council huddle, as I'm calling them now. So residents of the 8th Ward and, broadly in Evanston, just know that on the Saturday or Sunday before a council meeting, we'll have a pre-council huddle in on a Google Meets or Zoom, on the Zoom or Google Meets platform. So know that will happen, and look for that on the calendar and on on my city webpage. At a pre-council huddle at this meeting, some items that weren't on the agenda that I just want to throw out to staff is very simply getting seating at Robert Crown. I know that we're doing a lot of city services at Robert Crown, and I got complaints that we don't have seating available, particularly for seniors at Robert Crown, so I hope we can do that. Lastly, I want to make a reference to rules to review. I think somehow this got missed when we approved the committee chair schedule. We have several aldermen. For example, Councilmember Nguyen is chair of Rules, Economic Development, and Planning and Development. Councilmember Braithwaite is chair of Reparations and ANPW, and I think we should do a better job of dispersing out some of the committee chairmanships when we have certain aldermen who are chairing 3 committees. I think we can do a better job of spreading this out. So I'd like to see that at the next Rules Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fleming.
Just to tell the 9th Ward residents, sorry that our ward gathering was rained out this past Saturday. I will send the new email, but I think the next date will be July the 31st is when all the participants are also available. I have canceled the ward meeting for June, which was supposed to be this coming Saturday. So that email will go out as well. And then just our next activities in the ward for our summer community building. The next one is on Tuesday, the 22nd. We will have a Trans 101 workshop that is actually in partnership with Councilperson Suffredin, although he forgot to mention that. So that is at 6 p.m. So you can sign up if you're 6th or 9th Ward residents online. And then we will have yoga in the park on the 26th. They're so all available on the website.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly.
I'd like to announce our first ward meeting this Thursday at 7 o'clock at the Noyes Cultural Arts Center. And I'd also like to make a referral to halt an increase of the city property tax levy for the years 2022 and 2023. The total Evanston City property taxes levy for 22 and 23 should be no higher than, in other words, not exceed the 2021 levy. And additionally, every effort should be made to lower our property taxes. And therefore, any increase in projected revenues or decreases in expenditures should be used to reduce our property taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Braithwaite. Thank you. Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Reed is seeking recognition.
I apologize. There's one item that I forgot to make a referral on, and this is going to be going to Human Services for discussion and then eventually the full process. I'd like to refer to Human Services the decriminalization of all drugs.
Decriminalization of all drugs. Thank you. Seeing no further business to come before us, the City Council stands adjourned.